Hello and welcome to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Chris,
and I'm Swizz.
and we're getting into the midfielders today, Swizzy, and there's a notable absentee already. Someone's been taken off for an injury. I don't know if you noticed, but Ben's not here.
Mate, I think he's been caught up in the Cyclone up there, and he was last seen flying over to Ipswich in that 130k gale breeze that you've got going up there.
Well, as someone that is obviously local to Brisbane right now, it is pretty calm. It was getting a bit rowdy today, but the all reports Wednesday and Thursday are the days. I went shopping this afternoon to grab some essentials, and there's no toilet paper, there's no bread, there's no milk, there's no bottled water, there's no canned foods. So if you wanted to get canned soup or anything like that, then you're not going to get any of that.
Mate, I tell you what, every Victorian watching this podcast is just thinking COVID times right now, and having flashbacks.
I was like, dude, it's COVID again.
To that situation.
I messaged my partner, and I was like, do we have any toilet paper? Because we might be literally up Shriek Creek without a paddle. Like, if it's not, yeah. So, I've been pretty staunch in this. I'm pretty confident that they will move the game to round 3, which is the mooted thing that they're going to do. They haven't announced that yet. They really can't announce that yet because they don't have enough information to be like, okay, we're going to move it. But by tomorrow or Wednesday, they will definitely have the information, and I'm pretty sure that will happen, which does have a pretty big impact on Supercoach. But we'll get into a little bit of that later. First, Wiz, I just want to make sure, have you set your emergencies yet?
Set my emergencies? Well, mate, I've played NRL Supercoach for enough time, so I'm used to that coming up. And I was just like, oh my God, they've actually added this to AFL. And it is so annoying because every time you change your team, it's like, you haven't set your emergency.
Swizz, just occurred, like, how many times today have you changed your team?
Yeah, I actually went a 3-week period where I did not touch my team around the match. It's the longest I've probably ever got. Pre-season games happen, and I'm like, every 2 seconds. I had to work today, so I didn't touch my team at all, which was amazing. And then I get home and podcast, and so like, oh, let's change my team. So
here you go. Yeah, and then you're like, oh, well, yes, you're right. I haven't set my emergencies.
Yes,
I'm going to get right onto that.
Thanks for that notification. I didn't know that. Mate, before we jump into it.
You're right. I'm positive in the code somewhere they can probably just say, maybe we just don't put that warning up until after round 0. Maybe, just maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. But I don't know. Whatever. Mate, before we jump into the midfielders, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular the YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via Supercoach Insider 100. Chris is CFX_1. I am Swizz26. So, yeah. Do some of our best work on X. Did a little bit of my best work today. I was actually pretty proud of the tweet that I put out, but one in a blue moon.
No, that was a good one, mate. That was a good one. You know, it's actually funny. On X, when you there's a popular tweet going out on your For You, it actually gives you a notification, even if you haven't you don't get notifications from that user. I got a notification from you today just on your post without being tagged in it. I was like, oh, wow, he's actually going all right. This is popular in circles that you're among.
And I wanted to see how long it was going to take for the whole Trent Cotchin kicking the wrong way. And I tell you, it didn't take long. There was people DMing me going, oh, yeah, Trent Cotchin, is that giving you flashbacks? And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I should have thought about that before I tweeted that one out.
That was hilarious. All right, so getting into the midfielders, I suppose we start. We're going to start right at the top, right? We're going to start with Marcus Bontempelli. So obviously not Supercoach relevant right now. Draft relevant, yes. Obviously, you still want to be taking him. Draft, you just got to make sure you make the finals. You want to have Bont in your team.
Actually, it's a good question, Chris, you bring up straight off. It's like, how far does he fall now? And I think it depends on how deep your league is. And if you've got captains on as well. I feel like, there's enough guys in that sort of first 6-7 picks that I'd go elsewhere. And if you might get a real bargain at sort of pick 8-9 now, that Bont will just fall through that. But after that, it gets to a point where it's just like, nah, you just got to take him.
Yeah. Oh, and look, to be honest, one of the strategies that I used to employ, I don't really do it too much anymore because I'm not super focused on draft anymore. I used to be just heavily involved. Is that if you aim to lose the first few weeks by picking these guys that are going to have a really great back end of the season, or they might be injured at the start, 4 to 6 weeks ish, you'll be able to have a really high waiver pick. And in the first 2-3 weeks, even though you're losing, you're picking up all the really great waivers that are coming in with the role changes that no one really picked up or that's just sitting on the waiver wire. So, there's actually credence in just picking him up, pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, whatever it might be, and then just losing your games and being like, oh, well, who cares? I've now get the best waiver wire for the first 2-3 weeks. So, I would still probably pick him super high. I think he's far and away the best like captain selection. So if you're going to go down that route, definitely still go for Bont, in my opinion. But
and it also depends on when your league starts. And also for us, like most of us, and I know you guys out there play for overall, but there are a few people that do hit me up and say, I actually only just play for leagues. And you might be in a league that only kicks off in round 4, round 5, whatever. So you could probably just have Bont anyway, because what difference does it make? He's coming back by around that situation. And you're just like, cool, I'm just setting it up so I can beat my workmates or whoever you play.
And, obviously there's also draft leagues or normal leagues that don't play buys, right? So it's round 2, 3, 4 don't matter anyway. So there's all that too. So so obviously for standard, he's a non-selection at this point. I think that we all just need to hope that he drops some cash and we pick him up in round 13. That's really the only thing that you can do. Because when he comes back, let's say it's round 4, round 5, he's still going to be 680k. You're not paying that for him. You're going to have to wait until he tries to come down to probably a flat 600 or something similar, and hope that happens before the buy.
Were you going to fade him anyway?
I had teams all through preseason where if I had the extra cash, I'd put it into Bont, but it wasn't like I was so hot on him that I wanted to start him above anything else. Like I wasn't locked into the selection. And that's part of that is because the way that Supercoach has changed over the last few years, really, and more of a sort of value hunting style of game. I did start with him last year, but he was like my only real high priced guy. I went for serious value everywhere else through the team. And on every version where I had him in this, it was also really heavily value hunting. And like right now, I think the only 600k guys I have is Sheasel, Serong, and I do have Neale at the moment, pending what happens with this storm and the cyclone. But we'll see how that goes, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, mate. So no, I think that's a great point that you make in regards to Bont there, and then we move on to the second guy, which is also in the a bit of the emergency ward at the moment, and that's Zack Butters.
And I suppose similar, right? Like you're definitely not going to start him either. They're in the same boat. Like I think they'd probably come back around the same time. Zack Butters is obviously one. He's 650k essentially. Like no one's going to pay up for him, that early in the season either. So he's another guy that you're probably going to have to try and bring in. We're going to have to stack cash to bring in all these guys in say round 13 because obviously they all have the first buy. So are you really going to be trading him in round 6, round 7, knowing that they're going to miss a game in 4 or 5 weeks? Probably not. We're all going to be watching Zack Butters go 120, 130 and go, oh, like what do we do here? So there's unfortunately that just is what it is. It has one thing I will say is that the teams I've seen since both of those guys going down has changed. Everyone's got massively different midfielders now. People are on guys that I wouldn't have thought they would have been on. Guys like Jack Steele, guys like LDU. They're venturing out into these other players that they otherwise wouldn't have, and that's great for Supercoach because one thing that I've found with a lot of teams with these buys last 2 years is that starting squads, generally speaking, are really, really far too similar because everyone's picking the premiums that aren't on these early buys for obvious reasons and with good reason too. And that's one thing that I've hated about the early buys, is that it formulates everyone into having a very cookie cutter squad to start the season. So the less of these types of buys we can have in the early part of the season, the more varied squads you're going to have.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. And a few people are like, oh, the injuries, all those sides are going to look the same now. Completely opposite. The moment you get premium guys who are highly owned, and these guys both being over 50%, it is the best thing that happened from Supercoach. Awful from a footy point of view, but all great for Supercoach because everybody's pivoting to different guys now. The strategies have completely gone out the door. So to lose Butters, Philippou early, Mills. It's kind of a blessing from the Supercoach point of view.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing about Butters as well, just going into his fixture, is that let's say you pick him up in round 13, which is obviously just after the bye. Straight up is GWS, so there's a potential tag. Then Melbourne, who's obviously generally a fairly difficult midfield to score against. Then Sydney, who generally tag as well. Carlton, who have Hewitt, who they can deploy as a tagger, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So those 4 games straight after, like maybe you don't want to pick up a Zack Butters. He might be one that, honestly, you just, for the whole season, you kind of just don't pick up. So it's going to be a waiting game on Zack Butters this year, even though I love him to bits, and I think he's a fantastic player and is fantastic super coacher. It might just be that we just don't get a situation where we can bring him in confidently at the right price. So that's really unfortunate.
I agree, mate. I know we're trying to do this in order, but I think these 2 guys need to be linked. And I think we need to talk about Connor Rozee when we are talking about Zack Butters.
No, that's totally okay. Yeah, I agree.
So he was the obvious one I thought about going down straight to. We know the role straight away. The captain comes in, takes that number 1 role in the midfield. But also from a structure point of view, it doesn't hurt my structure. We know Butters is, it's got that bad bye. But if I'm looking at bringing Butters, Rozee's probably the obvious one that hopefully makes cash that I can side swap him, because obviously Rozee's role will reduce when Butters comes back, and it hopefully becomes a side swap, or even maybe it's make a little bit cash if Butters does drop over those first couple of games on his return. But it doesn't change anything in my team regards to the buy structure.
So there's a few things about Rozee that are really important for me right now, and it's very structure based. But part of the reason I'm bringing Rozee in is not just the fact that obviously he's going to get prime mid-minutes while Zack Butters isn't there. It's also the fact of their draw. So I was wanting to start Zack Butters because of their early draw, right? The first 3 rounds, Collingwood, Richmond, Essendon, right? So 3 teams that are generally not going to tag, and he's got a potential to go huge. We just saw him, obviously, preseason's preseason, but he just went 160, right? Like, I think there are other people you could pivot to, and I might mention those as well while I'm here, because we may as well. But my plan with Rozee is actually to use him as a springboard, and to hopefully he'll make cash over those first 3-4 weeks. And then after Collingwood's bye, hopefully Daicos has dropped some cash and you can sideways. And if they match price, that would be the best case scenario. But you imagine with the Daicos' early draw, which is quite difficult, and a couple of potential tags, there could be a really nice time there where Rozee's, you're capped out with his price. Daicos has lost all of his money and you can just flip them straight away. I would 100% do that. I'd do it in a heartbeat. It also helps with that round 12 buy, getting off another one of those guys. There's a few reasons why I like that. Now, these sort of moves are traditionally, I tried them. I tried one last year. I tried a Daicos flip last year. And I ended up making like 70K, I think it was, and like maybe 70 points, right? From a trade. It cost me a trade to do so. When I was analyzing that at the time, I was like, look, I didn't really make all that much out of it. I hoped that I would make more from the single trade than I did. But at the end of the day, I still made points and I still made cash, right? So it is a fantasy style move that you can try early in the season when you have the trades. And hopefully you don't run out of trades every year like we did last year when we just got absolutely hit with the injury stick. And those points do matter towards the end of the season. So I see a validity to that. But there's also in the exact same vein, you could say start Libba for the same reason. He's got 4 to 6 weeks of clean air as the number 1 mid with no Bont and no Treloar, and Ed Richards under injury cloud, and a bunch of B grade players taking up the rest of that midfield, probably C grade players. So to be honest, I actually don't mind the Libba versus Rozee conversation. And I know some people are more heavily into Rozee, especially off the back of his performance here. But Libba just put out a 120 as well. Like, he's nothing to sneeze at. And he's not fixture reliant because he's so in and under, right? Rozee is a massive downhill skier. Like, he will demolish lighter teams. Libba, it doesn't really matter. You can't really tag him because he's going to be in and under. He's going to get his tackles. He's going to get his ball. It's just going to happen. I had actually thought prior to the season starting that Libba might not be the best selection this year, just purely based on the fact that Ed Richards is coming in, Bont's still there. He still wants to, get that Brownlow. They're going to still have him as a primary mid. Libba's probably the one that's more on the out of that top three, especially once Treloar gets back, and they might, start transitioning him out of that midfield. But as I said, 4 to 6 weeks of clean air changes my opinion at 561K. I believe he is. What are your thoughts on Libba, mate? Oh, and Rozee, I suppose, because I probably took all of that.
No, I like it. So, and you're completely right. The thing appealing also with Rozee is their draw. Like Port have something like 6 or 7 home games in the first 10 or something stupid like that anyway. And the teams that they're playing at home, including my boys, and I've been pretty vocal about this, trying to have a player from each team Richmond is playing in the first 6 as either the VC or the captain option, because the reality is we are the team that you want the VC or captain option against. Now I do have Horne-Francis who could be that, but Rozee's the one that's going to have the bulk minutes in the guts. So he's very tempting, but you are 100% right. Like Libba, I think because he burnt people last year, including myself, and the people looking at kind of the injury and the age and everything, people are staying away. If you, again, for that strategy, what I was saying with Rozee, if you don't want to muck up your buy strategy, you want an easy flip when Bont comes back. Well, you could potentially just start Libba, and then once Bont's fit and firing and his break even's got to a point where you're like, I need to get this guy. Well, it's just an easy side swap without trying to have to find the cash. Yes, it's a trade, but the points that Libba's got is the points that Bont would have got in replacement, and you actually saved 120K by doing it, which you've put in your team.
That's the key. That it's this game, and I hate to reiterate it every single year, but is about it's you're buying points, right? That's what you're doing with your cash. If you can buy the same points for 560 or 530 or 520 or whatever it may be for someone who's 630, like I can guarantee you guys that are starting, say, Serong instead of one of these guys, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm on Serong as well, but I would be pissed, right, if I'm getting Serong 125s and Libba's going 125 for the first 6 weeks and you paid 60K less for him, like that's, that hurts. It hurts the bank balance, right? So there is a limit to what you can do with this. Like, can you start both? I mean, you can. If you're playing fantasy, you would.
I'm not actually against starting. I would rather start those two, say, instead of a combination with, say, a Petrarca, for example, because of the two reasons where Libba, both of them have the role where they are guaranteed M1. Like that's where I've could have been. Somebody was talking to me recently about, say, Finn Callahan versus Will Ashcroft, for example, is a good example. And I was like, well, they've both got an early buy. Why wouldn't you take the guy who's going to be guaranteed M1 in that team over a number of weeks against the guy who might be M3 or M4? Like, so Rozee and Libba, we know are locked in. They're not playing anywhere else for this period of time. And we want Butters and Bont in our team at some point. So when we're looking and talking buy structure, that doesn't change for me. So they're the obvious ones. If I'm sort of, if I wanted to go down the path of both, now at the moment I'm going down for one. But if Brisbane and Geelong, because I've got Neale on my side at the moment, if for whatever reason that game didn't change and the AFL just got really stubborn, well, then Libba is somebody I'd seriously considering, just because it's a 120K version, cheaper version of Bont. And, I'm not looking at him. Well, if he ends up becoming a longer keeper, even better. But I'm not picking him originally with the view that I got to get 23 weeks out of this bloke. I only need to get as much till when Bont returns.
And he's done it before where he's gone on 6 week stretches of 125 average. Like, he can do it. Like, there's no question in my mind. Like, I actually really don't mind it at all. There is, and this is one thing that I will say about structure this year. There are only so many midfield spots. And because of obviously the heavy amount of good rookies that we have in midfield. So you really got to try and pick and choose your battles. And if everyone's starting Clary, then the most anyone really has spots wise available is 4. So you really got to pick and choose where you're going with that. I don't think anyone's going 6 deep. If you're going 6 deep in midfield, I personally believe you're probably playing the game wrong. Like,
even 5, mate. I said to somebody before who was like, I've got 5 in there. I'm like, it's just way too much this year, especially with the rookies we've got on other lines. There's a ton of expensive rookies in the midfield this year.
Well, so I have 5 at the moment, and I'm every time I'm looking at changing things up, I'm like, okay, well, where do I get my money from? Well, it's got to be out of my midfield. But I
Mm.
look at the midfield and I go, who do I want to take out? And then I go, it's just that's the nightmare, right? So it's strange structure wise. You did mention it before, so I suppose that's probably a good segue. Lachie Neale, right? So all of a sudden, Lachie Neale is very relevant, and we both have him currently. And I released the best ever preseason team, amazing clickbait, a video, which by the way is still a really good reference point for anyone looking to have a look at how you should structure up your team or what it should look like, etc. But Lachie Neale all of a sudden comes into the equation with the potential of this game moving, because part of the reason we didn't want to start a Lachie Neale or a Dane Zorko, but obviously we're talking mids, is because of this early buy, right? So Lachie Neale, when you look at it, and I chatted to you today, I had not even considered him. And then I looked at their fixture, right? So look, round one, I'm not expecting, absolutely amazing things. Sydney are a good midfield. There's a chance that they try and throw a tag on him. Is he restricted? Is he not? Doesn't really matter. It's going to be a rough game, right?
I'm going to interject straight away there, Chris. Normally a good midfield, but already have Goulden and Mills not playing in that game.
That's true. But, they still would have Isaac Heeney, Chad Warner, Rowbottom. Rowbottom will go head to head with him for sure. Yeah. And, they can be fairly restrictive at times. It will depend on, what Sydney shows up. I really haven't been incredibly impressed by their preseason so far. But who knows? What we know that what Sydney can do, and if they can put people to a sword, especially at home. So, look, round one's anything, but he can perform because he's Lachie Neale. Sometimes Lachie Neale just has these games where you cannot stop him regardless of what you try and do. Right? You're just going to get the ball. I do want to specify as well with Lachie Neale. Over the years, he's shown a propensity to go big for a half of the season. And the thing is that fixture related or not? I'm not too sure. But right now I look at that fixture and I go, okay, after Sydney, West Coast, Richmond, Bulldogs, Collingwood, all very, very easy midfields to score against. St Kilda is a bit of an unknown because now they've got obviously McRae in there as well. But their third mid, it's probably Windhager for that game. Maybe he gets a tag. Then it's Gold Coast and North. So that, you've got, what's that? 7 of the first 9 games that are really, really good, like healthy fixtures. And I'm just talking the start of the season. Like it actually gets towards the end, it comes in as well. So you look at round 19, Bulldogs, Gold Coast, Collingwood, right before either the finals, and then Sydney Freo Hawks to finish off the year. So it's pretty damn good. He's a guy that, if you're going to be on him and he doesn't have that buy early, I think you start with him. I don't think you can try and pivot to him because he's too expensive. I think you've got to start with him. You're not going to bring him in round 3 after he's gone bang, bang, right? And they play Richmond round 4, I guess. But round 3 would be Geelong with their young midfield as well. Like, yeah, bro, it's scary. So right now, Neale's there. Is there any other like Neale things that are working towards him, or is it purely fixture based for you?
It is a lot of fixture base, and especially you mentioned the Bulldogs there. We talked about Bont, but also Treloar not being there. So all of a sudden, it's a young midfield up against Neale and Dunkley and McCluggage, Ashcroft. So
and they'd be borderline coming back in that round 5. Hey, so but if they're not.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I don't think they come back for that one because it's in gather round and then they're flying over Adelaide. So now you've got that little bit of extra risk where you might think, oh, maybe they don't risk the plane trip potentially. Yep. So they might try to get them up, but are you going to really risk somebody early like that? Who these are the your A-class commodities. Putting on a plane when you've got a big season ahead. So I don't think that happens personally. So yeah, you've got this clear air for Neale where potentially 3 games, and as you said, the Geelong game gets moved. 4 games there where the home games, against your Collingwoods and Geelong's probably the harder teams in that lot, but we know what he does at home, and then he goes and plays away games like at the MCG against Richmond. It's just going to absolutely have a field day, and it's those double points as well. Like he's a guy who you're just going to have VC because the Lions are going to have early games and rounds. And
agreed.
It's you're going to be kicking yourself, especially from head-to-head point of view, where you're coming up against an opponent who's got Neale, playing these matches. So we expect the Brisbane Geelong game, if it gets moved, it'll be a Thursday or Friday night. The grand final rematch is a Saturday. The Eagles one is a little bit different because it is a Sunday, but the Richmond game again is a Saturday. The Doggies game's a Saturday. We know the Pies is always the traditional Good Friday, but the Thursday night before. The Saints game's the Saturday, which actually happens to be my birthday. There's some early fixtures there where, hey, cool, Neale, thank you, VC. Let's lock in that.
Richmond game is the easiest VC you've ever had. It's his last two against them, 162, 143, and it's at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon, right? So you've got the Saturday night games and the Sunday games as a fallback. Yeah. The West Coast game where he's gone 143, 142, 123 in the last three is a Sunday afternoon at 12:00, right? So you'd probably have that more as a C option, but I think he's a great selection, especially like off the back of the fact that we don't have Butters, we don't have Bont. All of a sudden, we might get a Neale without a bye with an extra game in there. I think that it's a really easy selection and an easy flip. But I'll talk about, I suppose we will go to the next one, and this is why I want to talk about ownership.
So can I just interject with one last little thing about the Lions?
Absolutely.
They were only the 4th or 5th best team too last year. I think there's a little bit of chip on the shoulder because they started so slow. They came home like a house on fire, and obviously we saw what they did and got that flag. And you always got teams like, oh, you're going to start a bit sluggish because you're coming back after a flag. I think there is a little bit more in them with the fact that they've added a couple of midfields. We know they've lost what they've lost in the forward line with Danaher, but they've actually improved their midfield, got better support around it. So, though, it's not just reliant on Neale, which normally it's like, okay, you're going to have points off, but I actually think that helps him because, there's other guys he can feed the ball to. I think there's going to be their market share in that midfield could even go higher. And I think it's a kind of scary prospect if they're fired up and ready to go, and they've looked sharp through the preseason. I think they could come back with a real red hot go to try to make it 2 in a row.
Yeah, I agree with you. You'd have to be really against Brisbane, like myself, to not think that Brisbane are going to be at very least grand finals this year. They are a scary proposition. The only real downfall for their side right now is where are their goals coming from? They really do need Sam Day to stay injury free, and Hipwood to have a career year. But those aren't out of the realm of possibility. We've seen Hipwood at times really, really take games by the scruff of their neck. Now it needs to be him, right? And that's the difference. So we'll see how we go. So Daicos, obviously, the GOAT. A lot of people have transitioned over to Nick Daicos. I think at last check he was like 57% ownership.
61, mate.
61 he's up to far out.
I know. And you and I are both on that fade, which is scary. We both watched it the other day. We watched him put on an absolute clinic against the Richmond Cubs, which was always going to happen.
There are very few people that I watch, like few I should say footballers, that they do something on the field and you just go, oh, wow. Like they literally take your breath away with something that they've done. And it's just like, oh yeah, cool. That was just like a round the corner, chip pass to a leading forward that would hit him on the tits. Like stupid shit like that. Or he's gone the length from half back all the way to the forward line, had 4 or 5 touches in a sequence of play, and then it ended with a goal. Like, what's like, who does that? Like, there's not many AFL footballers that can do what he does, and that's why it's so crazy to think about fading him. So I get it. I understand. Do you want to run through your reasons? Because obviously I think they're pretty much the same as me, right?
Mate, if he didn't have the early buy and he wasn't potentially going to get tagged, now he can burn the tag, we know. But the Giants are going to do everything to try to stop him. They're the one team that will actually try to have a plan, especially now that Green's not there. So I feel like they go more defensive anyway. So, I feel like we can get him cheaper if it's a bad game. However, if he comes out and kills it, then I'm going to move one of these other guys and just I'll just get him in there. But the hope is I'm trying to think what's the score. If it's sub 90, is it sub 100? There's going to be a breaking point where I'm going to sit there and go, okay, he scored enough. I need him in. But and I can see it happening. But there's another part of me that also thinks, they'll put a good tag on him, and even though he could come out and score a couple of big scores elsewhere, I'm going to back, if it's a Neale or whoever else I'm taking up, to score similar to him. And that's the thing. It's just like he's the guy that I'll be trying to upgrade first.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a guy that you got to get in really, really early. And there's every chance that he gets tagged in 4 of the first 5 games and has a bye. So if you're running through that, GWS, obviously Toby Bedford has done a job on him and been successful in reducing his score. Port have tried tagging him and they've absolutely failed. So do they go again? Do they switch it up? I think last time, did they use Sam Powell-Pepper, I believe, as a tag on him? And then he burned him off like it wasn't anything, and I think he was on like 90 or something at halftime. And this is a waste of time.
They've got the obvious move to try this year. I would be sending Horn Francis right next to him and be like, well, you run that way, I'm going to run the other way, and we'll see who kicks the most goals at the end.
Honestly, you probably do that, or you run, say, a Willem Drew as a center bounce guy, and then someone else to run around with him. I'm not sure who that is, but we know that Port have tried to tag him in the past. Do they try and tag him? We don't know, but there's a chance for that. Doggies obviously won't. They're never going to do that. Then again, Carlton Hewitt, but generally speaking, Daicos scores pretty well against Carlton.
Yeah, he's had a couple of lower games, to be fair, against the Blues. And there's and when we mean lower games for Daicos standard, it's 101 and 100. He did have that massive 150, but I think he got involved late, that late goal.
Yeah, he kicked that goal, that winning goal at the end.
He might have not. I don't think he was on till that sort of last 20 minutes or something. He turned.
I remember this because you were complaining something hardcore.
Because I think I'd faded him, taking him out or something like that.
And you're like, yeah, of course. He turns up in the last 5 minutes and puts on 40 points or something.
Yeah, something like that. So I think he was on track again for 100, 110 games. So the Blues are actually pretty effective against him. They're the one club that. So I'd probably back Hewitt. He's got the right size. They sort of have runners that can go with him too. So it's always a decent matchup.
Yeah, and then Sydney, of course, have tagged as well, and they usually do that with James Jordan, and they've been very effective with it again. So as mentioned, take it with a grain of salt. It could backfire, and it backfired last year. And I think maybe this is playing into my thoughts as well. Is that Daicos, while he's an amazing footballer, last year everyone picked him up about 100K cheaper than what I got him for, because I paid up and got him early, right? So there is every chance that it's not nearly as much as that. There's every chance that now he works a lot further through a tag. And if you listen to any of the stuff coming out of the Pies, their coaches actually said, if I was coaching against him, I'd be tagging him every single week. And they've been training him to coach through a tag and train that midfield to get around that tag. So, I get it. We get all the reasons for it. 61% aren't wrong. He's still a great player. He's going to be a great season-long keeper. But for me right now, he's not in my team. And I think you can go both ways.
Yeah. And the big thing for me, even against we're looking further, it's Brisbane, maybe it's a Dunkley or whatever, but you want him for Anzac Day. So round 7, if you do not start him, that is the week you must have Daicos, because he will torch Essendon.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that I don't really love there's no real point in the Collingwood fixture where they have a real easy run, but probably from that round 7 until after the West Coast game, which is round 16, that's probably their easiest run. They do face in there Adelaide, North, St Kilda, and West Coast.
Yeah, it's more than non-travel too. On top of that, it's if it's not MCG, it's Marvel. I think they've got the one game on the road to Freo, but they've got Pies in front of their army. He's going to be up and about. They're going to be up and about. I can see Collingwood going on a run there where they just don't drop a game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the one team that's sort of his bogey team, unfortunately, we play twice this year as well, which is Hawthorn. He only averages 90.5 in his career against Hawthorn, and they have been getting him, right? So the Finn McGuinness tag will come into effect during those games, guaranteed. Just beware. Again, not a bad selection, and I would never say I'm not going to talk anyone out of starting Nick Daicos at all. Just not for me, not for my team. I'm going a different route this year.
I feel like well, that's the highest owned player. It's about 70%. So the 7% or whatever it is, 8% of teams that 9% of teams that probably don't have him are all the kind of the content creators and people that have been spending time listening to content
trying to
creators.
overthink the
We're
game.
all against
Exactly.
him.
Yeah, trying to overthink it. Yeah. So moving on, obviously, so Isaac Heeney. I don't know if you wanted to quickly chat about him, but I think he's a complete non-selection. I don't think anyone should be starting him at 629k. He's a sort of guy that
I
there's a
mentioned him, but
reason to pick him, but I just think that overall, in the scheme of things, not sure that you want to be starting a Heeney type that doesn't have really a season-long guaranteed role and a season-long guaranteed output.
I mentioned him in the pod, the Gold Coast Sydney one. Like it's surprising that more people aren't talking to about him, and it's obviously got to be that early buy, and because the fact that we're going lighter in the midfield. But let's not just forget the fact that this guy kicked off leading into his buy last year with 145 average, and was still averaging like over 125 2/3 throughout the season. And I think the short-term memory's probably got a few people when he went those 3 sort of sub 80 scores. One might have been an 82, but it's like a couple of 70s and an 80 late in the season, which crashed his average way down. But up until then, it was, here's the guy that we were getting 120 plus every week from. So I do agree, because I think there is a bit of a regression to start off with. But in saying that, would it completely surprise me if Isaac Heeney came out and averaged 125 for the first 5-6 weeks? Absolutely not. I just hope the fact is nobody's going to be on him anyway, so it's probably not going to hurt.
So the negatives are that he starts with Brisbane in round 1, and that was one of those teams last year that was 72 points, right at round 19 last year. Then he has Freo, and in round 16 last year he went 85 against them, and then he has North, right? And so you think that'd be a good fixture. But in round 10 last year, only went 83 points. Oh, actually, no. They didn't play. Did he not play North last year?
No, he didn't play the North game. That was the problem also. That's why a few people have gone, because he pulled out. But he did have the 83 against North the year before.
Yeah.
So
but that was a year where he was playing mostly forward. So with Goulden out, you'd still say that Heeney is probably going to play mid. Now, I do think that his best position for them long-term this year will be forward, because their forward line is makeshift at the moment. Is Tom McCartan the answer? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know yet. There's every chance at some point they go, Heeney, you're playing forward. And I just don't have that security at 629k. I need a lot more data points at this point.
The hard thing is, because leading into their buys when they play Richmond, so I probably don't see a point where it's like, oh, here's a great run of fixtures for the Swannies, where I'd probably nearly want to get Heeney in. There might be a point where he gets cheap enough and he is playing pure midfield, and maybe, but I feel like he's a guy that, he's not going to be in our sides. Would not be surprised if he comes out and kills it, and people then go and try to get him. And then, people come back, and you got Mills and Goulden around that midfield, and we see the regression, and, it becomes kind of a burn man.
Yeah, no, I get it. Now moving on, so Treloar, obviously a non-selection. Ari earlier, he's out for even longer than Bont. So yeah, don't even think about it. But if I'd still be comfortable picking him up with, say, a second round selection in draft, something like that. Like, I wouldn't be so far against picking him up that early. But depending on how deep your draft is, of course.
Yeah, for sure, mate. Happy birthday to his cousin as well, Travie. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. But anybody who's watched me do any of the preseason reviews have known that I've had the inside scoop on Adam all preseason, and unfortunately, it's not good with those calves. So, leave that completely alone. I think these two guys go together. It's the the purple haze, the duo, Caleb Serong and Andrew Brayshaw.
Absolutely. And let's start with this. Okay, pick one. Serong or Brayshaw, who are you picking?
I've been on huge on Brayshaw. Serong. Anybody who's watched me preseason knows how big I'm on him. But in saying that, I don't think the difference of them is going to be too huge. The reason is, and I've had a couple of people try to point me out the fact that I did mention the fact that Serong is much better in the home games, and he averages better with the wins. Where Brayshaw, it doesn't actually seem to be the correlation as much. And a few people are like, oh, you didn't mention Brayshaw's data when talking about Serong. Well, I was on a show to talk about Serong, so I was probably more focused about him. And this year they've got the extra home game because of North Melbourne selling their game. So all of a sudden they've got the 13 games over there in Optus, which does help. I expect Fremantle to be on an up projection and win more games than they did last season. So if that is the case, in those games, I forget the stats that I used on the coaches panel, but I feel like it was Serong was something like 122 average in those wins at home compared to it was like 104. Like there was like an 18 to 20 point difference in it. So if he's getting at least one extra home game, already that's a slight bump. If he's going to get more wins, we've got that extra bump. So we're like overall last season, he's averaged a 115. I'm bullish on the fact that I feel like this is the year he could go 120.
Yeah, look, I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm on the Serong bandwagon. If you also look at his games, I mean, and the fixture obviously speaks for itself, but that Geelong match is at obviously it's called GMHBA. Then Sydney at home, West Coast at home, Bulldogs at home, Richmond at Gather Round in the Barossa. So who cares where that's played? That could be played. That could be played at Whitten Oval. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Could play it out the backyard here, and
it could be played in Alice Springs. No one cares. Yeah, he's still going to rack it up, right? So, consider that a home game too. Then obviously an away game against Melbourne, so that might not be the greatest fixture. But then Adelaide at home, St Kilda Marvel, Collingwood at home, GWS away, of course, Port at home. And then Gold Coast away, which is a tough fixture because they generally play well at home as well. But then with that extra game, this is where it comes interesting, right? So they have a 3-game run straight after the bye, mate. North, Essendon, St Kilda all at West Coast, all at Optus Stadium. It's just going to be crazy. Like, it's going to be mental. And remember, because they're Freo, they get to play West Coast twice.
Yep.
Both. So they have that advantage too. And so, they go back to playing. Again, after that, they play Sydney at SCG, Hawks at home, Collingwood away, who don't tag anyway. West Coast back at home, of course, Carlton at home. And then the only other away games are Port at Adelaide Oval, and then Brisbane at home, and then Marvel in the last round. Like, they have one of the friendliest homes fixtures that you can find. And so that is the reason why I'm choosing, Serong. But I also find that Brayshaw is also, that's like, Serong is very one-dimensional in terms of the way that he plays. Like, you're not going to play Serong off a wing. You're not going to play him off a half forward line. Like, he's a dead set A1 midfielder. Okay. So Brayshaw, they've got, like, if we're being realistic about it, Freo do have quite a lot of mids that also demand playing time, right? So Hayden Young's out round one. That's fine. Hayden Young should be back for round 2 by all stretches. Hamstring or the low-grade hamstring is a 21-day injury. 21 days falls like on the Tuesday after their first game. Like, he should be fine to train that week and should be playing round 2. Okay. Then you've got Murphy Reid, who's obviously been, fairly good this preseason. They've got guys like Johnson, Simpson, Erasmus, all these guys that are looking and vying for trying to get form and to get into the team. I don't think they're going to be like, Brayshaw, you're out of the team or anything like that, or Brayshaw, you're playing wing purely because of this. But they could just lower those CBA percentage numbers down to allow the other guys a little bit more time to develop their guys, especially against weaker teams. So, and that's the only thing that I think about. I'm like, okay, well, if Freo are as good as we all think that they are, and me and you think that, it could be Freo's year, I think they're top 4 this year personally, right? There's going to be games, especially against like shit opposition, where they're going to go, all right, guys, we're going to put the young kids in the midfield. And Brayshaw is going to be playing off a half forward line, or he's going to be playing on a wing. I feel like that is a thing. If you're up 50 points in the second half, like, that's where I go, they're not going to move Serong regardless. They're not going to change him. They might change Brayshaw. And that's what swung me the other way. So I could be completely wrong on that. Am I splitting hairs? There's 30K between them. So it's not like money's really the issue either. Like, you're not really stressing over 30K. And if you are, well, that's, maybe, that's a little bit different. But personally, I think that Serong, because of those reasons, is maybe 5 to 8 points per game better. Personally.
All right, I've got the stats up from the coaches panel, so we'll share it here, mate. So in home games adopters, so this is the difference where they compared to the northern teams, because when Brisbane and Gold Coast are playing away against each other, they're playing on a different ground because they don't share the same ground. So as you said with West Coast, they get the extra game because at Optus, and now North Melbourne, who, funny enough, when they're playing West Coast, it's at a neutral venue down at Bunbury, I think it is, at Hands Oval. But the Fremantle game is at Optus. So Freo is the only one of all the non-Victorian teams that have 13 games on their home track this year.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason why I'm really bullish on them, because that's a big advantage. So in Serong's case, when he was playing at Optus last year, he was averaging 124.4, when then a neutral venue was 107 and away venue 109. So all of a sudden, it's got the extra game. And then in wins, he was averaging 122.8. And then compared to losses in 109. The other part we've also got to consider is Serong, 2 games last year. Actually, there was 6 games where he wasn't used as the M1 centre bounce attendant guy. There was 2 of those games where he actually dropped down to the M3 and M4. And they were the games where Fife took over as the M1. Fife is not being the M1 in any game this year. So if it's not Serong, it could be a Young or a Brayshaw.
They are in serious issues if Fife is leading.
That's right. But there was 2 games where Serong was bumped back, and he might have just been, couldn't get off the interchange bench, and it was just, that situation. But there was 2 games there, and because he was that M3 or M4, naturally, when you're in that position, you're not around the ball as much, and your average drops, and he's average dropped in those 2 games. So he's not going to have Fife taking that many CBAs off him. So again, there's actually a slight increase because of that. So that's why I'm so bullish on Serong this year, going, an extra home game, more wins, and the fact that there's a couple of games there where he should, now get an even bump in CBAs.
Yeah.
Why can't he be a 120 guy?
I agree. And look, that's another consideration, is that at the end of the day, I do see Caleb Serong as a guy that has the potential to be 120 plus, right? I don't think I've ever seen that from Brayshaw. There's glimpses. There's been times where I've gone, Brayshaw's going to be that guy. And then he has a 6-week patch of just meh. And then he drops back and he ends up averaging 105 to 110. And last year, obviously, was one of the closest. I think the highest he's got, right, 109.9. Is he a 120 guy yet? Maybe. I don't think so. I personally just don't see that from his gameplay. His inefficiency with ball in hand sometimes comes to haunt him in regards to that. Like when I love watching him play, and the way he plays is as a true center, the way that he goes box to box and goes right through. But when he's out on his own and uncontested, sometimes he just butchers the football, and it's really frustrating to watch. But anyway,
the last thing about Brayshaw, sorry, mate, was like you look at some of those scores from last year where Brayshaw did score his highest scores. That were the correlation where Serong didn't, which was the away games, like 123 at Marvel, 124 at Adelaide Oval. He had a 130, so it was a 137 at the MCG, 147 over at GWS. So there, Brayshaw, it didn't seem to matter where he was playing, and actually probably suited him more in the away games. Which we just talked about, the fact that they've actually got a less one there. And maybe that's the fact that he, because they're playing at Optus, he can be that wingman. They can kind of change things up there as well, play him a little bit more space. Where maybe it's the smaller grounds, and seem to be a few of the smaller grounds where they did have him, maybe more in the guts, because, okay, you're not going to be as effective out here. We're not going to run through the ball through sharp, and we're going to kind of change our structure. So you're going to have to run box to box more in those games. And he does get the link up more. One less game of doing that this year. Yeah,
fair call. All right, so moving on, Zack Meritt. Now, I have looked at Zack Meritt heavily this year because I it's been a couple of years now where he's not just been a back end merchant. He's actually been a guy that you can rely on for scoring. And news out of the camp at Essendon is that they were trialing him at half back. And when it got into match sim and stuff, it was yes, playing at half back, but only situational things. Late in quarters, which must have been a problem that they identified over the offseason or maybe even during the season last year, is that in red time, they were giving up a lot of scores. They were turning the ball over, coming out of defense, etc. And they wanted to reduce that. So they thought, okay, well, what's the best way to do that? Well, Zack Meritt's the best kick in our team. Let's pop him behind the ball in crunch time, in red time, and give him the ability to control where the ball goes. And hopefully they don't turn the ball over and they get scored against less, and it could lead to more wins. I think that is awesome game analysis. And I love the fact they're going to do that. And it could potentially lead to even more scores from Meritt, just getting junk time possessions in the back end of quarters. It's not like he's going to sit on the half-back flank. It's just they're going to push him back there for the last 2-3 minutes, get some junk time possessions and say, see you later. Okay, move back into the midfield at the start of the next quarter. So what do you think about him? Because there's obviously the buy issue, but outside of that, I don't hate Meritt as a selection. He just doesn't really fit with the rest of my squad.
I've been talking about that again all preseason. I've said, I feel like Meritt starts a quarter, goes off for his rest, comes back. So it might be, say, an 8-minute split, goes off and rests for 6-7 minutes, whatever it is, comes and plays his sort of 8 minutes. And then they get to that 24, 25-minute mark and Meritt goes straight down to half back. There's no Heppel anymore. So they're missing that leadership. Nick Martin was playing that role. The problem with Marto had no off switch. And Essendon supporters, they've all been messaging me saying, yeah, we know you watch games. We know you hate our guts, but we know you're there. You watch the games and you watch the frustration where we've got the ability to go out and score goals in those last 2-3 minutes because we take the game on. The problem is we get scored against, especially against the good teams, in those last 2 or 3 minutes. So he goes down, as you said, and waxes that ball and, takes a couple marks, and all of a sudden, it's, we love it. It's cheap footy at the end of a quarter. It's one of those picks where I'm just like, I'm not thrilled about, but it's just like, it's a solid pick. I want to own Meritt at some point. Am I going to have to pay more for him? No, I'll probably pay about the same price. I want him in my team at some point. If he didn't have the early buy, I'd probably I'll start him because I don't, do I see him being a guy that's going to push into the 120s compared to a couple others? Probably not. Until Butters went down, I was more hopeful on him. Serong, I feel like it's somewhere in that 115. Maybe there's a couple points there, but it's just, I like him. He's my favorite Essendon player, clearly. But at the same time, I'm just like, I don't see the value to go there.
Well, to be honest, I don't think he's a starting selection. And if you look at his draw, he's a really great post-buy flip option. So they've obviously got the buying great in round 4. But then they have Melbourne, so you're probably not bringing him back for that. So they've got Hawthorn, Adelaide, Port, by Melbourne. Now, those aren't the greatest fixtures, right? Especially for midfielders. But then round 6, West Coast, Collingwood, North, Sydney, which is tougher, and then Western Bulldogs, Richmond. So 5 of the next 6 from round 6 onwards. So he could be a guy. He's dropped 50K by round 5 or whatever it may be. He's 570K. You double down, go up to Meritt. I can absolutely see that being a case in round 6, but I just don't think that he's a starting selection. So for those that are starting him, that's, again, not going to talk you off a cliff with Zack Meritt if you think he's going to have an amazing year. But for those reasons alone, I prefer to trade into him rather than start with him.
This is where these mid-price options become interesting, where your Olivers, Cherras, Callahans, because if you don't, like in a perfect world, you want them to be keepers. And if they work out to be keepers, great. But if they don't, you want them to hopefully get the 100K that they make. And then these top liners lose 20 to 70, 80K. And it becomes 150K play through one trade going, cool, I've turned Finn Callaghan, Will Ashcroft, whoever it is, into Zack Meritt.
Yep. No, I agree. So definitely a viable option, but just not at the start of the season. Dunkley, I just don't see the point in starting someone who's, the second best line. He's a guy that you look at to trade in during the season. Same thing with him. Fixture's great, blah, blah, blah. Like everything that we said about Neale still works well as long as that game is moved. But I would rather obviously start with Neale. So I just don't see the point in spending 600K on Dunkley. doesn't make sense to me. But what are your thoughts?
He's the guy I'd love to have if he's going on that heater. The problem is you don't know when he's going on the heater, because like last year he did the 3 games of 140 in a row. Like there's just periods of time where it's Josh Dunkley month, and yeah, you want to be on. But the great thing is, no one's going to be on him, so it's not like it's going to hurt you. It's just one of those ones that you could potentially get a leg up if you were on him at the right time. But yeah, I feel like
the chance of that happening though, like
that's right, too right. So I'm happy to pass that. The next guy, mate.
Cripper? So we'll talk about Cripper and Walsh, I guess, at the same time. So Walsh, obviously, he should be right for round one. I mean, Walsh is apparently going to be bright for round one, which does change their midfield mix and midfield setup. And maybe we even link in Chera into here because we can talk about all 3 of them. But obviously, the reason why a lot of people, I think it's up to 10% now. There's more people on Cripper than there were 11, on Serong, I think, or 11% now. It's creeping up. Now it's the VC option for Richmond, right? Like everybody knows he's probably going to go gangbusters in that round one. So like, why wouldn't you? I get that. Patrick Cripps is gone from his like 118 averaging days. Like he is. Like he's not. That's not who he is anymore. So is there any reason to start him for 600K? Do you give him credence to being able to average like super premium numbers anymore?
No. My problem is, like, again, that fixture to start off beautiful. The Blues fixture, great. And I kind of want more Carlton assets because of that. But he's not the one. He might be right now, and it's fair to say, no, and this like Daicos is like, Daicos is like they're about to overtake and be clearly the best player in the competition. But right now, I'm happy to say Cripper might be the best player in the competition because he won that Brownlow by so much. He has carried that Carlton team on his shoulders for so long. And that takes a lot of skill to do, to really put a team on your shoulders and be the main man. And, he's had his knocks and whatever, but he's there, and, he's all heart and soul. So, but he's had it reminds me of kind of Dusty's career year. And Cripper's done it for like a long period, but he's gone out, absolutely smashed the competition. Neale should have carried the Blues further in the comp, unfortunately, but they still got to finals. And where's the upside there for that sort of guy? He's not going to be, as you said, he's not the sort of position guy that's going to get 120 points a game. They've got other ball movers around that's going to do that. He's there to, the big brute in the middle. He's going to win the clearance, but it's not the game which is in, which I think's great for Supercoach anymore. Like for what he does in the game, like other players would be turning that into 120, 130. But he plays a career year and gets a 110. Like, okay, where's the upside?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, I don't know who at the AFL you've got to pay in order to get 2 games against West Coast and North and an opening fixture against Richmond, but whoever that is, sign me up. Is there like a GoFundMe that we can get for our clubs to have that fixture? I completely in agreement. Walsh non-selection coming off a hamstring, right? Yeah. Don't go near it. Look, what we know about Sam Walsh is he has back issues, and hamstrings are 100% related to backs. And he's not done as a player, but I think from a Supercoach perspective, we can kind of write him off for the next few years until he proves himself that he can play out a season. Because I think it's 3 years in a row now. He's spent half the year on the sideline with serious issues. Most of them were lower back issues, and now hamstring. Like I can't trust a Sam Walsh like that. People have been bringing him in after he comes back from injury, and he has these great games, and then bang, does another injury, and then you're out. I think Walsh is a complete non-starter. I don't like him in draft. I don't like him as a league selection. I think that you just got to pass on him
completely. Yeah, no, I've never considered him. But
all right,
the third banana.
Yeah, let's get into that. So Adam Chera, right? And so like a few stats that are negative about. I'll go through the negatives and the positives. So first of all, the negative is he's likely going to be 3rd or 4th banana, and that is going to basically be dictated by matchups, right? So if they are going into a game knowing they want to tag someone in the midfield, George Hewitt will be that third guy, right? He'll be the tagging of the Neale or the Daicos or whatever it may be. Wherever they start, he's going to go. So if that's in the midfield, he's going to start there, right? That's going to force Chera a little bit more outside in those games. That's fine, right? There's also an element where, again, like we just said, Sam Walsh can just be injured at any point in time, and then they're going to have to play him in there anyway. And whenever there's that one injury to one of those midfielders, Chera's going to come in. So he does have an outside game, but he doesn't really score from it. And on a positive note, though, he averaged 108 in a year where he only had 44% CBAs. So he's proven before that he doesn't necessarily need high CBAs to score well. And having said that, there was a great stat that came out last year that depending on where your CBAs were ranked, your average point scoring output was capped at a certain amount, right? And apparently once you hit the fourth banana, you're struggling to make over 95, I believe. So, the scope is for me, anywhere from 95 to 110 is somewhere where he can average, which is pretty good for someone who's priced at 83, because at the very least he's going to get a 12-point bump and he's going to be a stepping stone. Or with that great fixture and fixture run, he jumps up to, say, a 110 early, and maybe he maintains somewhere between that and 105 and becomes, at very worst, like an M8 guy or an M9 guy or a flex guy that you could even push to that. I think at his price with his fixture early, it really is a no-brainer. People aren't choosing him is because they can't fit him in their structure. So structurally, I understand, because they're like, Isaac Rankin is a guy that I love and I want to play, but structurally, I've really struggled to fit him in. So he could fit into that boat of he just quite doesn't fit your structure, therefore you're not starting him, and that's okay. So what do you think, mate? Where are you on him?
2017, Cam Rayner goes pick one. Probably the best half forward kind of in that game. Big part of Brisbane. Brayshaw 2, 3 LDU, or he was 3 or 4. Paddy Dow will just put to the side. And then
he doesn't exist.
And then there's a guy named Adam Chera who actually went top 5 in that draft. So this is a kid that's been highly touted since junior days. Big ball winner. I think a lot of people forget he was part of Freo's team and Carlton went and got him. He's now in that perfect mix. So these guys who we're talking about, Brayshaw and LDUs who are getting mentioned a lot as, the next cab, who can these guys push to be the top guys in the league, and played that sort of 100, 120 games. Chera's in that mix. He's played that many games now. We've seen, unfortunately, some injuries in recent times. Mm-hmm. But when he gets on the park and he's fine, as you said, that 108, that does not surprise me, because he's a highly touted, high-pick player who finds the ball with ease. And he puts string of games together, as you said, with Walsh. He'll go out and score a 160, and then the next week he's either injured, it's an 80, it's all over the shop. Chera, a bit like Dunkley, he can put 4 or 5 games in a row, which is great scores. Now, if he becomes that season keeper for us at that, and he averages close enough to 110, tick, because around that 110 mark was your Tom Green last year, who was on that verge of top 8 anyway. Awesome. We're paying it an 83 guy to be a top 10. Excellent. Mm-hmm. But even if he does go down at some point, you hope it's some point throughout the season where great Chera's done his job and he's got us to Meritt or Bont or one of these guys. Brilliant. 100%. And we've talked about the draw, about Carlton being absolutely KOTD, and it's just unbelievable matchups. Like, he's getting no attention against the Tigers, which is the big start, because he's going to, just come out of the box and do whatever he wants. Bulldogs underman, West Coast, North Melbourne, young Geelong team. It's the perfect start. And outside of the fact that it was Gather Round, which is the over in Adelaide, the first 7 matches are all in Melbourne. So it's not even traveling, which is probably going to be the thing which will cause some of those soft tissue injuries.
And the Gather Round is against West Coast, bro.
Yeah. So big deal. So it's, the fixture could have not been any more profitable for us from a Supercoach perspective to start off with. And then we can kind of reassess and see where things are at after the Geelong game.
And the difference between the injury risk with Sam Walsh versus the injury risk with Chera is 140K. And that, like, That's the quintessential difference. I'm happy taking on board risk when it's built into your price. I'm not happy taking it on board when you need that to be a success for that pick to move to work for you. Whereas Cherry could flop after round 5 or whatever, but like you said, he's made his money, he's done his job, he's put up some good scores. You push him on. Like that's probably worst case scenario is obviously an earlier injury, but the risk is lessened and lightened by the fact that he's obviously such a low price. So
it's Elliot Yeo vibes from last year. Slightly cheaper than Yeo, but the position for Yeo had was better. But it's a guy who we know is going to be playing the guts, and pretty well like Harley Reid came in. He was nearly the main guy last year, but he's coming in there outside of a couple of games he's tagging. He's playing midfield. He's got numbers where he has. It's not like, oh, does this guy have a ceiling? Like he has produced in the past before. His top score against the Tigers is 147. He's got other scores of 144, 139, 132, 134. So he finds the footy, and if he only has to spike with a couple of these games where if he gets in the 130, and it's serious projections.
Oh, absolutely. Now, next one I want to go through is obviously LDU. He's the next on the list here. I'm not sold on LDU. I'll go through why, but have you had a look at his stats from last season?
I have.
Here's the thing, man. I went through the exact same day. I went through the stats for Harry Sheezel and I went through LDU. And I went through Sheezel's stats and I'm like, this guy is just next level, right? Like, doesn't matter where he plays. He's like 30% CBAs. Oh yeah, 146. Like, 50% CBAs, 150, 0% CBAs, 139. Like Sheezel could it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where he is, what he's doing, how much mid-time he's getting. He'll score anywhere on the field, right?
Well, I looked at LDU mate, scores. Before you jump on the LDU, Sheezel, if Daicos was at North and Sheezel was at Collingwood, Sheezel would be the biggest thing in the game.
No.
Yeah.
Incorrect.
He would. Because the attention would... No, but the attention would be like through the roof if Sheezel was
at the big club. Look, that's not to diminish Harry Sheezel, by the way. I love Harry Sheezel. And I think that he's one of the best emerging players in the game, if not one of the best players in the game right now. But Daicos is one, and there's daylight, in my opinion. Like, I don't see anyone close to him. That's how I just think,
mate, if he was getting the hype and stuff that he was getting at the big club and whatever, I think Sheezel would perform, and you'd notice. I think people would probably even notice him even more. And he'd probably get. It'd be easier for him than it is probably a little bit at North Melbourne. But anyway, we can split hairs on that. That's no problems. But I think the guy's an absolute superstar. But LDU, mate.
LDU. So, when I'm looking at his score, so obviously he had that slow start to the season, right? And everyone's very well versed in it. And then he picked up in round 9 when he went to the Gold Coast and got a 109. And then a 152 against Essendon. But the rest of the scores, there was 3 140s in there. But then there's a 72, there's a 97, there's a 92, there's a 94, there's a 100. Like, no consistency at all from LDU. Is that an effort thing? Is that a North Melbourne thing? What is it that is stopping LDU from being who we all see in those 150 games when he goes gangbusters, and then those 70 games where he's just like he's disinterested from engaging in playing football? And I personally, I don't want that on my team, and I don't see it changing. Like, what has changed? He gets 80% CBAs. This guy's one of the premium midfielders in terms of role that you could possibly get in Supercoach and in AFL, and the inconsistency is ridiculous from his game. Can you put anything on it? Is there something that has changed this year that makes you want to I just want to be on it? Or
I can put something on that, because I was trying to work it out too, because as you said, it is all over the place and you're trying to map out on what the hell is going on here. Now, the 147 Collingwood Marvel, the 152 Marvel against the Bombers, the 141 Marvel against Richmond. The Richmond game, they beat us. The Collingwood game, they should have smoked you, but you just came from the clouds and beat them.
We don't deserve to win that game. That was stupid. That free kick, there should have been a 50-meter penalty in the last 10 seconds of the game or something. Yeah, we didn't deserve to win that game.
And the Essendon game, they were right in that until the 10 minutes to go in the third quarter, and then the Bombers just kicked away and just went bang, 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 game over. So 3 games under the roof where the Kangaroos were right in that game. And you talk about a mental thing and effort thing. Now, I don't know if that's just him because he's on that day and he's leading the team, or the fact that the boys are on, we're a chance of winning this game. And all of a
it. So
sudden,
is it LDU performing well that is
this
resulting in the wins or the close wins, or is it North performing well is doing that, and then we expect him to naturally improve because North are getting better? I don't know how much to read into that, but I see where you're going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I was sort of now all the talk in the media is, oh, they're going to improve and whatever and stuff like that. Like every team's improving. Like, yes, and they got guns.
Yeah.
We've talked about Shees and we've talked about other reasons and stuff. But like, are they going to improve that much? Like, they're going to win a whole lot more games? I don't know. I don't see it. And if they aren't winning those games, then and even like looking at further, like the Melbourne game again, 148, that was at the G. They were right in. I think they lost that game by 3 points. So it has to be, those. If they are, and if you seriously think North are going to be in games a lot longer, or if you think they're going to win more games, then 100% LDU might be your guy, because there's enough evidence, I feel like, there to say if North are in these games, they're winning. The other thing I do like is the fact it's a contract year, and players just like everybody, you're out of contract, you're trying that, you just switched on that little bit more. Be no different to any of us in our jobs. If we knew our contract was coming up, bang, I'm doing everything I can to put those dollar signs on and increasing that. So there is that thought for me. But if North are, going to deliver the same as they've done for the last, 150 years, and that's my worry. Like, I kind of look at their sort of fixture and go, there's periods in there where I wouldn't mind maybe jumping on an LDU when they've got sort of Richmond twice in about the space of 10 or 11 weeks. West Coast is included in that. You get the Saints, the D's, the Bulldogs. Yeah, they could get on a good run. But the start of the year, you got the teams like the Swannies, the Blues, Port Adelaide, the Lions. It's not selling me to go. These are games the Kangas are going to go well.
Gold Coast, he's going to go head to head with Matt Rowell.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
So if North aren't competitive in these games, LDU is not scoring well.
Yeah, I just don't buy North getting better. What specifically about their team this year is better than last year?
Well, I think everyone goes natural progression, and this is like side chat a little bit about this. But you look at it and go, Collingwood's added Houston and Perryman, so natural improve, and Daicos naturally just improved himself. So you've got that part. Adelaide, as much as I don't think Adelaide, improved that much, they've still brought in Peatling coming. Thilthorpe's back, who will straighten them up even further. I'm trying to think of the Lions. You've got the Ashcroft boys. Yes, you've lost Danager, but you've still got Ashcroft. But so you go through each team. The Saints, they've gone out and tried to boost their midfield. They've got McRae. So many teams have gone out and said, okay, they've improved. It's only really Richmond has gone the other way. Like Freo's brought in Bolton. So yes, North, you might have brought in a Parker and a Darling, which will help with their senior experience.
And
yes,
Daniel,
there'll be natural improvement out of Sheezel and Kucher, but there's improvement out of everyone.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a strange one. Like, if I was to put them on wins, they've sold 2 home games to WA, so they only have 10.
Probably losses.
So they're West Coast, they could still win against West Coast.
They could, but they might not. Right? Like West Coast, again, we talk about teams that are improved. West Coast have got Graham Baker, Harley Reid's another year, better development. Flynn's probably an upgrade in their ruck department. It's not me. It's not like, oh yeah, everyone's like West Coast is going to be awful. Yes, but they've still improved maybe at the same rate North Melbourne have.
Yeah, I think we're overwhelmingly against it for now. If he proves us wrong and he becomes an upgrade target, great. I just don't see him as a starting selection in any way, stretch or form. But each their own. He's still LDU. We still know what he can do. We're just talking about as a starting selection for 23 rounds, is he a good pick? And I'm not entirely sold on that as a pick at his price.
If he hasn't signed like that first sort of 8-9 rounds, and he's still looking, and he's probably maybe dropped 40, 50K and he's average around that 105, yeah, I probably might get keen with the fact that their fixture does start to open up and feel like, well, here we go, But at the same time, it's like if he hasn't signed, it's like why? So I think there's going to be a lot of questions that I want answered throughout the season. There'll be a period of time I can see LDU coming into my side at the right price, and as I said, I love guys out of contract. It wouldn't surprise me if Chad Warner dropped 60, 70, 100K and he hasn't signed. And I'm like, here we go. We can get on a run. So I do like guys like that, but it's that you've got to pick your moment with LDU.
Yeah, I agree. I know someone that's come sort of into vogue in the last couple of weeks is Jack Steele. Are you want to ride that train again, or are you done?
I'm not completely against it. And it's again because I don't have a Saints player and they played the Tigers early on. So I'm looking at it and going, I kind of need a VC option for that one. Is it Wanganeen? Is it Steele? Does McRae help Steele? I think he does. He does look kind of fit in there. My issue is I think St Kilda are going to be rubbish.
I think they're going to be so bad, bro.
So bad.
They're going to be terrible.
Yeah.
They don't have
sorry,
a forward
Saints supporters.
Again, they're like Marshall's had an interrupted preseason. Who knows where he's going to be able to produce? Like they haven't really gotten better. Like McRae helps them, but who did they lose? They kicked out other players out of that midfield. They lost Philippou, who was their X factor. I don't know, man. I don't think things get better.
So I think McRae helps Steele, and it does not surprise me at all if Steele, like if he averaged 115 for the year, wouldn't surprise me. But I don't.
I'd be shocked if he averaged over 110. I'd be shocked.
Like for me, it wouldn't surprise me. But at the same time, like he went 112 last year, so it's pretty well 113. So it's like 2 points big deal.
My thing is so. I do think that McRae, man, he looked good. Like, I think that he does take a lot of ball out of there. Like, the one problem that I see from between McRae and Jack Steele is I really don't know why they wanted to go with that pairing, because Steele is that tackling in and under mid, and they've just gone and got another one.
Yeah.
What they really needed was like some sort of two-way midfielder. And McRae's not really that. Like they need someone that can spread from stoppage. They need someone that is quick and able to move both ways. They don't have that in McRae. They've got a kind of a lesser version of Steele at this stage of his career, right? He does get in and under. He looks really good. He's going to get the handballs out. He's going to feed. But is Jack Steele going to be the one on the receiving end of those handballs, or is it going to be other guys? And that's where I go, I don't know if this was the right move.
I think it's going to be boring football, mate. I think there's going to be a lot of handballing back and forward between Steele and McRae.
Maybe it's waxing, and they both have a bit of waxing.
As I said, it wouldn't surprise me if both go 110, 115, and the Saints are bottom 6, and you just go, what a awful club to watch, boring football. But they're just the recipients of, just because of the game style. Maybe it changes. And that's the thing. When does it change? If Philippou gets right, they make some corrections at some point. They don't really have a forward line to kick to if Max King's not there. I just don't like their team. And the only thing that's kind of appealing is the fact that they do play the Tigers twice. But I'm more than happy just to leave Steele alone. There's way better options.
Yeah, I mean, they do that, but they actually have a quite difficult fixture. I mean, Adelaide first up, and then Geelong's not, they're not easy beats, but their midfield will probably allow them to score. Then they got Richmond, but then they've got Port, GWS, Dogs, Brisbane, Freo, Carlton. After Richmond's not a good run. Honestly, the Saints fixture's not great. It does get better in the back end of the year. So in round 19, Geelong, Melbourne, North, Richmond, Essendon before GWS. Like the back end of the year is not bad. I think it's a timing thing with Steele. Again, we're saying this a little bit. Is it a starting selection versus is it a guy that you can upgrade to? I think Steele is a guy that you could probably go. He's dropped down to just over 500K. I'm going to trade him in, and he might be a guy that go get 110 for the rest of the year. And that's different to what we're saying is who you should be choosing for a starting selection.
So I should correct myself. It was 109 average last year. So maybe it's 3 points, gets him to 112. But as you said, It's meh. It's just I'm paying. Yeah, I'll pay probably cheaper for him at some point if I wanted him. And I probably still don't want him. That's just how I feel.
So
as Chris disappears there, but that's fine. I was going to naturally go to Noah Anderson because I know he'd probably want to, but he'll want to talk about him. So we'll move down the list here, and we'll go to Jordan Dawson just wait until Chris comes back. Jordan Dawson's currently in 10% of teams. It's for me again. I think there's just too many players who are taking that midfield time. So Chris, who's just joined us, so I said I'll leave Anderson for you in a moment. I've just skipped down to Dawson. I just think again, there's just too many people in that midfield. The big thing with me with Dawson is he's gone from one of the best kicks in the competition. It was a beautiful kick 2 years ago. He did have some injury issues last year, which affected his disposals, and nothing changed again the other day. So he found a lot of ball in the practice match, 135 DT for 110 Supercoach. And
same thing, man. I said the exact same thing. I was like, he looked like roll gold. And then you look at the stats and go, huh? Like, this is a guy that is arguably one of the best kicks in the competition. I think he might be the best kick in the competition, right? And for whatever reason, when he kicks, they don't hit targets.
Yeah.
He tries these kicks that are too hard. He does it every single year, and he'll get on a run. Don't get me wrong. There'll be these runs where he'll go 140 for 6 weeks, right? But then he'll go 80, 90, 95. And his DT ratio, he's going 110 on those. But he's not hitting targets. His efficiency, and I've done the stats on this, have dropped between 10 to 15% on his kicking efficiency since when he was a defender versus when he's a midfielder. And he's not a worse kick than what he was there. It's just when you're playing half back, it's a lot easier to find those targets, right? He's a lot more pressure in the midfield and so on and so forth. His floor's raised in the last year from his tackle numbers. So he's actually, playing as almost that defensive mid at times, getting very high tackle numbers. And that's a good thing as well. But does he average more than what he did last year? I don't see. Maybe there's a 5 point per game average in it. Is he 115 Jordan Dawson that we've seen before? I can't see that at all. I don't like what has changed about Adelaide or him to do that. You're basically hoping that he hits more targets. You're saying to yourself that the entire of last year was an anomaly, and this year he's going to kick better. And the first time we've seen it happen, he didn't happen. So, like, where's the other progression from his scoring that I see? You're just basically throwing a pin at a dartboard and going, maybe this year it'll work. Maybe this year. But to me, again, another guy that I don't think you should be starting, but definitely someone that you could look to upgrade. You're going to be cheap enough during the season. If he has a good run of fixtures, you could bring him in.
Yeah, and the midfield mix scares me off too. Dawson, Crouch, Saligo, Peatling, Rankin. They're just going to run so many players through there. We know Dawson's the captain, but because he is the captain who can play multiple roles, he can go change that in any given day. Injury happens, he'll go fill it. It's kind of the Cal Mills effect that I was talking about earlier in the preseason. But the difference is Dawson's at full price, where Mills was obviously a lot cheaper and a better role for Supercoach point of view. So we can park that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, a good one to grab Dawson, round 22, right? So final specials, he goes West Coast, Collingwood, North, last 3 rounds. So league finals, or you get an injury late, Jordan Dawson's your man.
Yeah. All right, let's circle back.
Circle back to so I will just touch. So obviously Goulden and Green non-selections again, both injured. In case you're wondering, I was hot on Green before that injury. I thought he could have another chance to spike. He's got the game to be able to do it. But Noah Anderson's the guy, guys. He's the guy. He's coming in. The starting fixture is what really drags me into Noah Anderson as a selection. But the fact that he's also now captain of the football club means he's got a really cemented role. He's got to take it on his shoulders to be able to work through tags. And they're going to now work. Well, not that they didn't try last time, but they need to now work to get him free when he's getting tagged. And that was pretty much what let him down last year, because his ceiling is through the roof. And it's just his low games. He has a really low floor. that comes with exposure to the game and coming into it at a time where he's now a prime time mid, coming into the peak of his career, and B, experience of getting tagged. This happens to a lot of players. Happened to Daicos, happens to everyone. It's this sort of inside-outside hybrid when they start getting a lot of attention from opposition midfielders, and defensive midfielders at that. They don't really know how to cope because they've spent their entire lives running rings around people, right? And now they go, oh wow, this really great defensive player that's playing his game. He's playing a separate game to me. He's playing. I just want to stop you. I don't care about the ball. They're not playing the same games, and it takes a while to adjust. But just to go through some of the highs of last year, so 122 against Richmond, 129 against Adelaide, 155 against the Hawks, which is huge, 151 against West Coast, 149 against Geelong, 150 again against Essendon, 140 against Collingwood, 132 against Port, 122 against Melbourne, 128 again against Richmond. Just huge scores, unfortunately coupled with 59 against GWS, 55 against Carlton, some 90s sprinkled in there, a 70 against North. 70 against North is just can't happen, and like an 85 against Brisbane. So the floor's there, but the ceiling's definitely there. So what we know is if he can get to that next level in terms of being able to manage a tag and work through to raise his floor, he has the scope and potential to be that guy that goes 115 to 125. There's also a great statistic that came out last year during SEN from Champion Data that the closest player in the league to Marcus Bontempelli is Noah Anderson in terms of how they score during Supercoach, which is just incredible. So at some stage, this guy is going to go mental. He's 574K. I personally think that this is the year to do it. I've actually kind of squeezed him out of my team at the moment because of what's happening with the Brisbane situation, but there's every chance I start with him. What's your honest opinion? And of course, this early draw. So sorry, I almost went through everything, and then the first 6 games are ridiculous. So he does have the bye, which is unfortunate, right? Round 2, but most people won't have anyone else in that bye because it's just GWS and Gold Coast. But West Coast, Melbourne, Adelaide, North, Richmond, the first 5 of the first 6. Is just incredible run, right? So he could be averaging 130, 140 after round 6, and then everyone's going to be like, "Oh, let's bring him in." But then they play Sydney and then Sydney and Brisbane back to back, which isn't the greatest, next 2 games. So I think if you want him, you got to start with him.
All right. So there's 3 things I want to bring up here. Firstly, friend of the show, Supercoach Ant, who's been on a few times, Gold Coast man. He has not left his side this year. He's talked about him at length on when I've had him on as a guest. So massive raps. They made him the captain over Matty Rowell, which says to me they would potentially risk losing a Rowell, even though they're best mates. And you think Rowell does stick around, but at the same time, clubs are coming after Rowell. Clubs were going to come after Anderson. But they kind of view him as like the Touk Miller. He's going to be there. He's going to be the heart and soul of this club. He's going to lead the club. We know as a captain, it's all on your shoulders. And, there's going to be that natural uplift. And as a captain, these floor games the low floors just can't happen anymore. The low floors that we've talked about, where they were pretty well much the away games. The away games this year are, West Coast, Melbourne, North Melbourne, Richmond. So they're the early ones, St Kilda. So the teams that we're expecting to be on the bottom half of the ladder. If he's not if he can't score against them, he's never going to, have a good floor for us. So he should improve. Like there's nothing holding him back where he should be at least, even if it's not 50s anymore. If it's 80s, you'll take that because we know the home form is just going to be off the charts. He even loves playing at Darwin. That suits him to the T, and they've got the back-to-back games against the Doggies and the Hawks up there again. So the negative for me was, and I was hoping so much that the Suns game gets moved with Essendon because that's one home game we're losing from nowhere this year. So hopefully it does flatten out, but that is a little bit of a negative because the gap between home form and away form off the charts. For me personally, until it looked like the Brisbane and Geelong game likely to be moved, this is one of the reasons why I was wanting to start Zorko. Not only because the Lions do have a nice draw, but I was looking at Zorko for, depending on how he went in round 0, but round 1, round 2, bye. And then depending on Anderson versus Whitfield to do that flip, because I always like doing potentially one flip there. And it means I still get the premium scores for those weeks. I have the cash to go. And it was going to give me at least one look at Anderson, how he looked away. Because if it was, he went to West Coast and found a way to not score again. And then I'm like, okay, I've got question marks against him. And that's just my only worry at the back of my head. But I feel like as a captain now that, we shouldn't be seeing a 55, which is his lowest score against West Coast. Again, this should be still that 100 triple figure game for us.
Yeah, look, all of those are valid. And I think we're both of the opinion that he could pop this year. And it's going to suck if I would hate if he pops and I'm not on him. He does also, I will say this, he makes watching footy a lot better. Watching Gold Coast a lot better. He's just awesome, right? So there's all that. That's my thoughts. All right, we'll move on. Now we've already gone through some of these selections. Rory Laird, I do want to touch on. Complete non-selection. Playing halfback and paying $560K for him. Yeah, nah. His best average at halfback was like 108, wasn't it? So why are you paying $560K for him? Like for a best case scenario of a 108? I don't think so. Not for me.
Just wait until he gets dual position and then reassess.
100%. You don't need to go out and spend the money. Chad Warner, contract year, is he relevant?
He could be at certain point throughout the season. He's one of those guys I will watch come kind of mid-year. Again, if he's out of contract, when that draw really opens up for the Swannies. So it's after that first sort of period of the 10 weeks. In a perfect world, you love it after the bye, but leading into their bye, they play Melbourne, Adelaide, Richmond. After the bye, they've got the Doggies, St Kilda, North Melbourne, and the grand final weekend is West Coast, which could be his new team. So he might be looking to impress. So just something in the back of my mind for future planning to go, if he is out of contract come that period still, I wouldn't mind having a little look at what Chad Warner's price is.
Fair enough. Petrarca. So he played the practice match.
Yeah, this is the big one, ain't it?
What do you do with him? Because we were all hot on him in the start of when Team Picker opened up. Everyone was hot on Christian Petrarca, like 556K, he's going to be good, blah, blah, blah. He goes down with another rib injury, which is obviously the injury that he had that he almost died from against the Pies last year. And he plays in the first practice match and he scores well. And now do we go, oh, well, actually, Christian Petrarca is that good. Do we look at him? Or do we go, it's too much of a risk, it's probably not worth it? Look, the fixture's not bad. Like GWS round 1's not the best fixture, obviously, but North, Gold Coast, Geelong, Essendon, then Freo. Then it really opens up. Richmond, West Coast back-to-back, round 7, round 8. Before Hawthorn, Brisbane, Sydney, St Kilda, Collingwood and Port before the bye. The run home, Gold Coast, Adelaide, North, Carlton, St Kilda, West Coast, Bulldogs, Hawthorn, Pies. So the run home after their bye is actually quite good. I don't know. I am completely off it right now. Mainly because of structural reasons. Like if I had a guy, like if there wasn't other guys around his price, like the Rozee, like the Libba, that I'm looking to do a flip with, and if there wasn't guys like Oliver and like Chera who are so much cheaper that it doesn't make sense to start Petrarca over them, then I'd probably consider it. But right now, it just doesn't make really sense as a starting pick for me in my team. I can understand people starting with him, but just for me, it just doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I'm 100% on that, mate. I didn't actually have him when it first opened, and there's a couple of reasons for this. The draw looks awesome, no doubt. Even the Giants first up, undermanned because of Tom Green. So no problems there with the fixture. It does look very friendly, and we know the Ds are all in at the moment because an aging Gorn, aging May lever, it's now for them or it's never. So there is a bit of I'm taking that into account, and I think if the Ds can string some early wins together, they're good enough to make the 8 if they stay fit. But the problem is what happens if he gets a bump into those ribs,
Yeah.
niggles, and not just the physical side, the mental health side to it. And it's huge. Like, I'm big on this. We'll throw that in. Mental health round for everyone, men, women, whatever. Start the AFLW season earlier. Have the whole frigging comp plan, whatever. Danny Froy round, whatever you want to name it after, needs to be done. So mental health is huge. And for this guy, probably more than nearly any other player in the competition, it is number one factor. So he might look fresh and look good right now. I don't want that in my side when there's guys at the same price. If we didn't have Libba and Rozee and all these other potential guys, Anderson is only, 10, 20K more. If we didn't have those guys, then fine. If it was just Petrarca at 550, you're going, okay, probably, because there is get out options. You can go down to Will Ashcroft, Phil Fincan, Hallahan, Chera, all these guys. He's Buddy Clary if you weren't starting him for whatever reason. So there is places you can go with him. I don't want the worry each week where I'm watching Melbourne games in fear that he's going to cop a bump and he's just, his mental side just loses it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that he's also a guy that, is he really going to burn you and put on 100K on his price in the first 6 weeks? I don't think so.
The question, but I think his buddy's more likely to do the, like, what's Petrarca's top end right now? It's just, I've always thought, like, he can string moments together. Like, but he's actually more, if anything, he's probably a more consistent guy. Like, I'd be more worried about a Clary putting on weeks of like a 150 or a 160. Petrarca has a ceiling of, it's probably a 140. I
couldn't even remember the amount of times where Petrarca's been on like 80 points in a game. And then in the last 10 minutes of a game, he puts on 35 points and goes for 125. Yep. Like it happens so many times. He can just, string together points really quickly, but it ends up always being that sort of 110 to 120 to 130-ish range, What do I think that he averages this year? Like, uninjured, I don't think he averages what he did last year. Oh, sorry, what he did 2 years ago, which was 118, I think. I think it's more like maybe 110 to 115, maybe 112-ish. I don't know. It might be worth it. He's not a bad selection. He just doesn't fit a lot. And I suppose moving on to a guy that also sort of fits in that same mold is Ed Richards, right? So I was hot on Ed Richards as well. Look at this start that Ed Richards has, right? Ed Richards. It's ridiculous. Round 1, North. Round 2, Collingwood. Round 3, Carlton. Round 4, Freo. So some really great fixtures there early. The first 2 or 3 games, I think that he's going to go gangbusters. Especially, again, remember, no Bont, no Treloar. And Libba probably taking the lion's share and the most attention. He's still going to be just running around there, just collecting points. I don't mind that at all. Now, they do have Brisbane in round 5, St Kilda round 6, round 7, GWS. But then it opens back up. Port, Gold Coast, Essendon, Geelong. So they have these patches all throughout the season where there's potential to go really big from an Ed Richards perspective. At 531K, my only issue really is like calves, bro. Calves and midfielders, in terms of soft tissue injuries, they just seem to linger. They seem to hinder performance because it's all your explosive power, and they do reoccur very easily in AFL. How comfortable are you starting a guy that had a calf 3 weeks before the preseason started?
Well, I'm not with the way the Bulldogs are falling down. And I don't like the pick now that Bont and Treloar are actually out of the side, because you're not tagging and putting attention to Libba in an under guy. Hard to do. Let him scoop it out. So who's the guy that's going to get attention if he's getting off the chain? I think it goes straight to Richards now, because there's no one else. Are you going to really put attention to the kid Sanders? Probably not. Kennedy's not that sort of player. And there's only one person that's hurting you at the Dogs. So we know he's been doing a lot of work preseason about getting the attention. And but it's all going. So if Carlton, say, round 3, and Chera's the one that starts in the midfield, but if Richards gets hot and he's 40, 50, 60 at quarter time, Hewitt's going straight to him. And now this is the challenge now, because he doesn't have the other midfielders that would normally able to support. where it's different if you've got Bont and Treloar there. And are you putting full on attention to a Richards when you've got a Bont and a Treloar there? No. But now it's just like, well, there's no support. You lock him down, the Dogs, they could be in a bit of trouble. So I don't like the start at all.
Yeah, fair call. And look, I'm now off the pick. I flipped that to Rozee the moment that Zack Butters went down. So, all right. Now what I'm going to do here, we're going to speed up the next few guys because there's obviously we're starting to get a little bit less relevant, and we'll pause when we hit someone that we think is relevant. All right. So, I'm just going to ask you flat yeses or nos, and you just respond, and we move on. Right. So,
Easy.
Tuke Miller.
No.
Matt Rowell.
No. Draft relevant, but no.
Yes, agreed. Hayden Young.
No, injured.
Josh Kelly.
No.
Ollie Wines.
No.
Definitely not. Jai Newcomb.
It's a no for me, but I can understand why there is some interest.
Every Hawks fan on the planet wants to start Jai Newcomb, and everyone else does not care.
Yeah.
I just don't rate him, eh? I don't know. I watched him.
I know you've never rated him. It's fair to say you have
know.
never rated him. We've had a few off-air discussions and chat discussions about this. I'm a bit more bullish on his role. I always have been, but I get your reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. McCluggage.
No, not now.
No. Tim Kelly.
No.
Tim Taranto.
I get asked about him. Like he's a Richmond premium. Yeah, it's like
there's no such thing, bro.
Yeah,
don't joke.
No. Like Nankervis is our only premium, so it's a no.
Rowbottom.
He's just sneaky for draft because he keeps sliding. So watch that if you haven't done your draft yet, because he slides so far,
especially with Golden out.
Yeah, such a good one. I've picked him up a few drafts. Yeah, I love it. But no, it's a classic.
I thought that maybe he'd be fighting with Sheldrick. But now Sheldrick and him are going to be in the same team because I can't see them not playing with Sheldrick. So that's another thing. Caldwell is interesting. So Caldwell, unfortunately, his price is just too high, but he played some bloody good football last year. And I'd love to see him continue that. Do you think that there's a realm where Caldwell becomes a premium midfielder?
You're on the wrong bomber, I feel right now.
Oh, you want to get to the Durham?
Yes.
So I picked Durham in a draft super late, and I was so happy about him. Look, I think that let's talk about these two picks in 3 picks in 4 picks. I want to say, all right. So there's 4 guys at this at the exact price range. I don't know if I can do it structurally, but between Will Day, Sam Durham, Darcy Parish, and Josh Daicos, who now is playing across halfback. All 4 of those guys, they are outside chances at going sort of that 105 plus. I don't know where that plus lands, but I believe that all 4 of those picks could do it. I have no idea who will. And I thought it would be Will Day until he only went to 50% CBAs in the practice match. So you tell me what you think about those 4 picks, and then maybe rate them 1 to 4 for those guys that are looking at that price range for a selection.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to have Day at 1 just because he's the one that has he's got the game, he's got the body to do it. Looked good against the Geelong game. He was carrying the Hawks in that match sim. He had those real low scores last year because they were injury affected and still averaged a 91. So is there upside? Yes, there is. But I feel like if I'm picking him, if he didn't have the early buy, maybe I'd be more interested. But it's, do I see him going 110 to 115? I feel like he gets close, but not close enough. And I need to see more consistency with his body, which is the problem. But as a guy who's to the upside who could do it, I've got him. Yeah, I'd have him at 1. Josh Daicos, he's going to wax with his brother. They just look for each other all the time. But
he's going to get defender status. I'm Pretty confident of this. Like,
if he, that's the thing. I'm like, as a non-starter, no, there's games where he'll spike, but yeah, if he does get defender status, well, yeah, of course, that changes the game. As a
I
pure
honestly think
midfielder,
after his bye, he becomes a really relevant. If we start tracking stats, he becomes a relevant pick purely based on the fact that he'll get defender status, and he could be a guy that goes 105 plus as a defender. But it's a risky selection, and I would say that's a real pod selection too. Like, what's his ownership at?
oh, it'd be nobody will have him.
Yeah,
2%.
and in draft, I was looking at him real late, and the round that I was going to pick him, he got picked 2 picks before me. I was
Yeah, it's so
spewing.
annoying.
But I don't mind. I don't mind him, but he's one to watch, not one to start. I'd probably say.
Yeah, he, as you said, he is the one after the bye that becomes interesting as a bit of a left field, but I'd probably have him maybe down the bottom as a pure midfielder of these guys. Yep. The reason why I say Sam Durham is probably number 2 on that kind of list. The captains were all asked about Supercoach this year. It's probably been the first time they've actually directly been asked about Supercoach. Who's your guy? Who's your smoky for us? A lot of the captains naturally go young guys. Zack Meritt comes out and says, yeah, I know you probably want to go young guys. Yeah, I'll give a larger artist a bit of a rap, but he goes, yeah, I'm all over Sammy Durham. And for the captain to kind of come out and say that, we know he was mature age. He's done everything right from country footy. He's come through the Richmond BFL program, got picked up at Essendon. It's this real year now where he's, he knows the system. He fits into that midfield. Parrish, I don't see Parrish necessarily being the guy that used to be. He's nowhere near it. Not now that you've got Caldwell and you've got Durham and you've got young Sardis.
There's only one.
I actually shouldn't say Daicos fourth. Daicos should be third. Parrish, yeah. Parrish has got one game a year.
Yeah,
he wins
that's how I would rate it too.
But the only thing with a Durham, he doesn't probably have the ceiling, but as a guy who's going to be probably a consistent guy who could probably every week roll out and get between 90 and 110, I think that'll be probably him.
Well, I'm going to skip through some guys now and go to Clayton Oliver, who seems to be the next relevant selection.
Before you jump in here, mate, can I just say Warple's a draft smoky of that. It's he's sliding a bit in drafts as well, so I quite like him. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, fair call. So Clayton Oliver, obviously, I think everyone pretty much has him. He must be the highest owned guy, right? Like
he is. Actually, let's have a look from a midfield point of view, and we take out Daicos is. And no, actually, there's no, he's ahead of that other guy too. So yeah, Clayton Oliver is number 2. Daicos surprisingly number 1.
Now, unsurprisingly, he goes 132 in the practice match, but he kicked 3 goals doing it, which is unlike Clary. Let's be honest. What did you see in that game to convince or to maybe even question the Clary selection?
There was nothing that was making me question him, mate. It's the best I've seen Clary look in 2-3 years, mate. It's 24 months straight off. Moved around the ground, ball. The fact that he was getting the goals that he was kicking as well. It's not. It'd be a different story if he was sort of kicking them from 10 meters out and it was just a contested thing. But there was one where it was like 40, 50 meters, no problems, just slotted it through. Well, and you're up against a midfield here with Serong and Brayshaw and just no problems at all. Was like I was expecting. It's like, here we go. He's just going to labor through this game. He's going to get an 80. I'm going to have so many questions about him. Do I start looking at the fade? And I'm just like, lock this guy in. He is the fantasy pig is back.
I agree with you. I don't think there's any reason not to select him. I think you'd be silly not to. If you take last year's out of the equation, he averaged 120 for 4 years straight. That's an average over those 4 years, not like averaged every year, something different. And it ended up being his 4-year average was 120. That's insane at such a young age. And then to drop off a cliff with well-documented reasons for, and then to come back looking as good as he is, sign me up.
And we spent half an hour talking about Petrarca's fixture. It's obviously the same fixture.
It's the same fixture. Yeah, exactly. So going into, I want to talk about these 4 mid prices guys that are all around the same that we're getting a little bit of traction on. Again, rate them. So we've got Callaghan, Ashcroft, Ed Langdon, Tom Powell. They're all between 430 and 440k.
Yeah, I was thinking, is there a better option than one of those guys? But no, it's all right. We'll cover those for us. Like Ed Langdon was a bit of a shot. I think you need to take Ed Langdon out. There's a more relevant guy that people are talking about who's way more highly owned, and he's tracking towards 10%.
But is he priced the same way, or
yeah? Well,
pricing different.
The four I was going to talk about because they're all priced the same. So Callaghan, Ashcroft, Powell, and Harley Reid's the one that.
Oh, no way people are jumping on Harley Reid.
100% people. He's 7%. I've seen him at times at 10%.
They're all West Coast fans, bro.
Oh, but we've got to talk about it. So put Langdon aside, mate. Harley Reid's the one we're going to talk about.
Okay.
But we'll get
on
that.
There is a reason why I mentioned Ed Langdon, and it's because he's now playing as a CBA mid at Melbourne. And he played that way and looked very good in the preseason match. Now, does that carry into the season? I do think so. Does he get as much CBAs as he was in that? I don't think so. So it'll be interesting to see if he can string that together with scoring. He scored well in the practice match. I don't know if it continues, but I don't think he's really going to hold a candle to these other guys in terms of average. So I'm going to park that for now.
The guy I've got rated 1 out of these 4 guys, and let's put Langdon 5 for me. It was actually, he's just finally gone above. So he's now at 4%. So he's gone above Tom Powell. But at one point, he was actually the lowest percentage owned of these 4 guys. And that's Finn Callaghan, who is now the number 1 guy at GWS. He tempts me for my starting side. And if he didn't have the early buy, I would have him.
I mean, with Tom Green not there for the first 4 to 6, it really gives him some clean air to just go absolutely gang. But again, like, how are you fitting? So if you're weighing these guys up, you're saying you want one of these instead of, say, Chera, right? That's really what you're
actually going to start all 3 of them in a world if Callaghan didn't have the buy. Callaghan has the buy, it makes it tough. So I'm not choosing one. I'd rather go the other 2 options we have. But if it was at a point where let's just say the defensive rookies were absolutely, there was none, and we had to go as far as 6 deep because there was just nothing there for us, and I needed to bring money down. There was one moment I was playing around going, I can get this team to work if I bring Finn Callaghan as, either be and have the 3, Chera, Oliver, and Callaghan. Yep. He looks so impressive, and unlike Tom Green, who gets his 30 touches and scores 110, awesome, but that's what he relies on. Callaghan's DT to Supercoach is really good. He's just turned the Godfather deal down to stay at the Giants.
Yeah,
Cogs looks cooked, so it is literally his midfield, and I think he's kind of ready for that. They've got the early games against West Coast and St Kilda, Adelaide. After that, there's a couple of harder games in there, but by then Tom Green sort of comes back in. But even when Green comes back in, he's still the second guy, and he's still probably the better ball user out of both of them. Showed the ability to get forward and hit the scoreboard. There's a lot to like about this kid. I don't know if it's the full breakout this year, but he might be the one next year who we're talking about as the 115 guy.
Yeah, and look, I also love Finn Callaghan. I just don't think. I think that whilst he might go gangbusters early, I don't think he's going to be that big that it's going to be like, oh, wow, he's made me 100K. I think it's probably more like he makes you, say, 50 to 80K early, and then when you have to train him, like, you're kind of forced into it. You don't have the option. Because I think when Tom Green back, he sucks up so much more of that midfield that Callaghan role gets reduced substantially. Obviously, he'll still be in that top 3, but he's not going to be 1 anymore. Tom Green's going to be 1. So that will impact his scoring. Is it a good pick? Yeah, I don't mind it. I just don't know how you fit it in structurally, personally.
Yeah, I think I can see a world people start him, but you've got to, and even if Tom Green takes a week or 2 to get back into going, like, he could go 110. I've got no problem 110 over the first 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But then he's the guy that obviously they're moving on. But as a starting pick, I think that 100K, he could do 110, make 100K, 6 weeks, no problems.
It could happen, yeah.
Yeah.
Ashcroft, I'm an off as a pick, and this is after seeing the recent preseason match. I mean, Levi's just too good. They are really similar players, and watching them out there, I'm like, I couldn't tell the difference between either of them. And my fear is that whilst I thought that this was the year that Will Ashcroft would break out because he would get more mid-time, I think it's the opposite. I actually don't think he gets any more mid-time. I think that they have A1 and AB in Dunkley and Neale, and the third rotation is going to be thrown around between him, Hugh McCluggage, Levi Ashcroft, and anyone else that they throw into that mid-mix, Jared Berry, whatever it is.
Cam Rayner,
yeah. So how does he get more mid-time? Like, I don't see it. Like, Levi's going to get some mid-time. I think Levi gets 25 to 30%, right? So he's not going to get a lot, but he's going to get some. And then Ashcroft probably gets around 50%, but that's not going to be enough to really break him out of, I am a premier midfielder in the comp. He will be, but it's going to be reliant on Neale and Dunkley taking lesser roles or retiring before that happens, because they are ahead of him in the pecking order right now. Do you see a world where Will Ashcroft is given the reins to that midfield this season?
No. He needs an injury.
Yeah. And if that was to happen, jump on. One injury, if Neale or Dunkley get injured, then it is on. You jump on as soon as you possibly can. 100%. But yeah, it would need to be obviously a season-long injury to give you that confidence. But yeah. Now, Harley Reid, what is no? Surely not.
Yeah, we got to talk about this, mate.
No,
because people will get annoyed if we don't. Because I'm getting multiple questions about this kid. Now,
how? There are literally there are 4 other guys around his price that are better options.
Yes, and his percentage says otherwise, which is amazing. I think it's because he is the rock star of Perth, and you'd probably be right.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's the Essendon supporters that think they're hoping he comes home if they pick him in their Supercoach team or something. Yes, the ceiling is there, like he's shown it, but it's West Coast still. The problem I've got. The problem I've got with it is it's not like, okay, it's him and we know Yo's injured and it's him and Kelly. They have just added Jack Graham, Liam Baker. There's guys that they've added around him. Now they're going to support him, but he's a second-year player, and realistically, Clayton Oliver, Nick Daicos, like, is he in those realms the way he plays?
He's not the same player. He's an impact player. He's Dusty style, right? He's going to be a guy that is a high impact, lower possession player that can impact the scoreboard really well. And we've seen that in patches. He had a 147 versus Freo. He had a 138 versus Melbourne, but he had 7 scores under 66. It is going to take time. I'm talking 2 to 3 years until you see consistency from Harley Reid, which he could end up like a poor man's Patrick Dangerfield. Would be like an ultimate, like where he's that powerful, speedy, high possession midfielder. I don't really see that from him yet, but I didn't see that from Dangerfield when Dangerfield started, right? Could it be more of a Fife? Fife was sort of a 28 possessions per game, but really high impact, kicks goals and scores because of his contested football. I think those aren't comps yet that I would say he's not a pure mid in that sense. He's a forward guy that comes into the midfield and goes bang. That's personally what I've seen of him. Am I the all-knowing globe of everything Harley Reid? No, I've watched a lot of Harley Reid football, but I wouldn't say that I know everything about him. But that's just my perception of what I see from him.
I think Horn Francis is Dangerfield. He couldn't be any more Dangerfield than Paddy Dangerfield himself. Harley Reid, for me, I think he's kind of nearly a bit more Bont style. Get sort of 20 odd possessions, get scoreboard impact. I feel like he could turn into sort of that kind of player. But yeah, it's not yet. It's not next year.
That's a serious like guess at a breakout. Like
it's not
that's
happening.
Ultimate. Like I just want to jump on it because I want to be there. Like that would be like me picking Noah Anderson in a situation when I had the money to get Serong and didn't pick Serong. Like the evidence is already there. I'm already banking in probably a 115 average. I'm not hoping on a breakout to get to that point. Do you know what I mean? That's the difference. So that's why I don't understand the pick.
Yeah. So the fact that you can combine 3 of these guys to get his percentage, it's just awful.
Yeah.
But hey, if those people have Harley Reid, we might put up a code for you to join our leagues, and then we'll go from there. The guy
I picked him up in a draft. I picked him up like round. I must have picked him up as one of my last mids.
Yeah,
like
I picked
really
him up late too. Yeah. I was like, fine, I'll pick him up late. And nobody was like, people were like, yeah, that's how people are feeling. They're like, yeah, I saw him, man.
Oh, yeah, it might happen. Like, whatever. Like,
whatever.
Yeah.
Tom
7%.
Powell was the one that was going way earlier than Harley Reid.
And obviously that's due to the injury to George Wardlaw. But
yeah,
my issue with Powell is, okay, so he has a start that might be all right. Maybe. I mean, last year we thought this was going to be the case, and he was playing pure midfield and then literally just did not score and played like shit. So what's changed? I don't know. And then George Wardlaw, he comes back. He's playing midfield. He's way better midfielder than Powell is, in my opinion. So where does that sit him for the year? Are you trying to play the short game? Like, what are people trying to do with this Powell pick?
The only thing I could have thought from a North Melbourne perspective, they've got an inkling that maybe LDU's leaving, and Powell is going to be part of the Sheasel, Powell, Wardlaw situation. That's kind of the thought around that. He was a high pick. So, he was an accumulator as a junior. And he did show the late in the season when he put up the 3 tons in a row. So he does have some capacity there. But as you said, it's dependent on Wardlaw. There's a lot of issues there with North in regards to performance. There's a lot of mouths to feed too. They've got one of the best ball users in the comp, young McKercher, outside of the players that we've already talked about as well. A lot of mouths to feed. Could he be that kind of maybe that liver guy for them or something like that, in and under and pick up the ball? Is it with Wardlaw not being there, is somebody going to do the tackling? And we know this guy loves the tackle. So that might be a slight upside there. Like he did have a game last year where he put 15 tackles in a match. So Wardlaw does get his high percentage of them too. So does he just come out and get 40 points each week because he's tackling? Maybe. But I think there's better picks.
I'm with you on that. We're going to go back to our no yeses because some of these are irrelevant. Players like Dylan Shield.
Mate, no, actually, no, I should say this. The wife will be happy for me to say this. She's like a big no. She's like, because he can't kick. She's like, oh, we've replaced Nick Martin. She's like, we replaced Nick Martin with Aldi Nick Martin.
Aldi Nick Martin. So true. I'm not on Dylan Shield. I have him in draft, great late draft selection again, but like, nah, not going to happen. No, sorry. All right, moving down the list. Further guys that we're probably going to say no to.
Skip Tanner Bruin there. No one believe that, mate.
Oh yeah, no way we're going to mention his name in this conversation.
James Peatling.
So is that Well, I was gonna stop at Peatling, but there was another one that I thought that might have been interesting. Jack Graham. Oh no, he's a forward. He's a forward. That's Peatling's the next one. So look, I will say that I've not really been fond of the Peatling pick because on my initial preseason research, the numbers that he needed to get in terms of CBAs in order for him to score well when he was at GWS was really high. He was essentially a 75% CBA midfielder. And in order to achieve that, just to put this into perspective, there's only 13 players in the AFL that have, in the last 12 months, had over 75% over the year. So this was to get him to average 95. So for him to be a successful pick, what does he need to average? Now, if you're just looking as a stepping stone, great. But what's he going to make? Maybe 100K if he gets 60% CBAs. He's not getting, I don't think he's getting anywhere near that. I think where he sits is probably 50%. And for that reason, I think he averages maybe 80, 85, and is just not a viable pick. That's my personal opinion. Other people are really hot on him, given that he's obviously they've come over here. Some people are just so against Matt Crouch that they're just like, nah. Well, there's no way that they play Matt Crouch over Peatling, dude. Matt Crouch isn't going anywhere. You should see Nick's talk about Matt Crouch like he's the second coming of like the only guy that's ever had a first touch handball. Like, it's ridiculous the way he talks about him. It's like a man crush. Until Matt Crouch leaves that midfield, I don't think Peatling is a selection.
Yeah. Mate, I thought I had him in pre-season because I was buying the hype from the Adelaide supporters who were saying that there's no way Crouch is in. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. No problems. Peatling, they've brought over. It's a good mix with Dawson, Peatling, and then you're rotating your Rankins and everyone else in there. But yeah, as you said, Crouch is still there. Soligo feels like it's a bit one pace for me. I think Peatling would be the better move, but yeah, not this year, unfortunately, unless there was a couple of big injuries.
Yeah, completely agree. Oliver Hollins.
Yeah, I was hoping you keep scrolling to him.
Yeah, look. The only reason why I think he's possibly a better selection than Peatling is, well, I mean, he's obviously 20k cheaper, but round 6 gets DPP. You can swing him back, maybe take a rookie off the field. Like, there are more elements to the selection than just like, if he doesn't get CBAs, then you're cooked. Like, there are ways at which he can potentially only average 85-ish and still be a really good selection. So his ceiling is like to get to where he needs to be a success, I think, is different in the Ollie Hollins side of things. Again, these picks at this range, like, who are you not have on field because you've got an Ollie Hollins in there? Like, I've seen teams with like Ollie Hollins at M3. Like, and I'm like, we're not playing the same game, bro. So there, that is a very, again, fantasy way of doing the game, where it's a super value, just trying to get everything value in your team as possible. And I've seen Ollie Hollins in like M7, M8. Like, and again, I go, the rookies, like, they're pretty good this year. Maybe you should look at them. Where do you sit with him, and has he been in your team at all this preseason at all? Or?
He spent a small bit of time in my team. I know JP's been really hot on him. There's a couple of reasons for this. So the back end of the, so he's only averaging 54, gets the halfback role, goes 90, 72, 116, 96. I kind of am looking for that extra Carlton player to have in my side because of that soft fixture that they have for that first 6 weeks. And then after the first 6 weeks, he'll get dual position status. And great. So it's not a case of like, oh, it's a hard run. He's only going to go up 30K. Cool, I'll get him when he gets the defender status. He could seriously spike and be 70 to 100K more expensive to then bring him into the defense. And by then I'm like, well, I don't really want to pick him for defense. So there is a thought of like, at least if I've got him, great. And because maybe the fixture gets slightly harder, maybe he sees a bit, but though Carlton's fixture doesn't seem to get harder, they're just gifted with easy games every week. But I kind of do like him on that side of things. The other part with Ollie, he's outside of the injuries that they've had down there too with Carlton. I see a clear space for him coming off that halfback. Reasonable, good ball user, big pod, and I feel like it's a lot of people either got, say, a Sin or a Hugo Garcia, one of those sort of types. So you're around that 230, 240 range, whatever it is. So if there's another rookie that pops up, you might have to go down and get that extra 120K, 130K, where it might be, say, a Nathan O'Driscoll who you might not be hot on, or maybe let's say Sardis, and they've got Parrish in the team. And you're all of a sudden like, well, there might be alarm bells there. I don't want to be having a Sardis if they're loaded up on their midfield. Yep. So if you're downgrading one of them and you had that extra 120, 130K to get one of those premium rookies up to Ollie Hollins, I don't mind that play so much. If all looks well and these premium rookies are right to go, I would rather them at M6, M7, and M8. But I'm not against the idea of Ollie Hollins at an M6.
Yeah, fair call. Not against the pick. Doesn't really, set my world on fire. And I think that's probably where I sit with it. Like, yeah, you can do it if you want. I think he's better than Peatling, to be honest. Like, I'd rate them he might above Peatling, but that's where I sit with it. There's only one other guy that I probably want to mention in this podcast. We're probably getting to that time. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes of just us chatting, which is great. And that's Isaac Cumming, who I was hot on in the preseason, but the role that he had in this preseason fixture was just pure wing, and he was getting far too high up the ground to be relevant. I had hoped that he would be, when he was peak at GWS and scoring, that 95 average, he was doing so with kick-ins and as a distributor off half back. And that role does not seem to be there at all, Adelaide. They seem to be really content. They had Mark Keane as the main kick-out taker. Between him and Hinge, I don't think there's going to be any ball for Cumming in the back line.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. I do have at least one guy I do need to mention, and that's actually slightly up at Richmond, and that's at Jack Ross.
Oh,
and
yeah?
Just because it's more
is the only guy.
It's more, it's probably they're more draft and classic, but you've got Hopper's injury history. We know Taranto at times misses game. Dion Prestia, you completely rule out.
He's not. I can't believe he's still on the senior list. He just must have
amazing,
a
isn't it?
Surely they just get rid of him.
So there is a world now. No Graham, no Baker. Jack Ross can find himself in games where he could be the M1. It's not out of the question that there'll be a game there where he'll be an M1, or even for a period of time. At very worst, it could be the M2. Showed against the Pies, he was the one midfielder that actually looked half decent against you guys. When you're smashing it. So we're talking about sort of Peatling. People might be going, oh, where do I go from Peatling? Because that's the sort of the money. He scored 99 again the other day. The problem is we've never seen the history, but he's never had the opportunity. So would I liked to see a more, some sort of period there of a 4 to 6 week scoring? It'd be a huge pot, a huge risk. I really like him as a real great late draft person, but unfortunately, because of that score against the Pies, people were starting to take him slightly earlier than what he was falling. If you when drafts were going earlier, so
that happens.
So that's a little bit frustrating there, but it would not surprise me because there's always some guys like that, and you go, wow, that guy ended up getting to 460, 470, 480K. If Jack Ross were going, wow, he ended up putting 150, 180K on his score just because the role suited, because there was no one else around him.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Fair call. And look, I wouldn't begrudge anyone from doing it. I think it's ballsy to go a Jack Ross selection, but if he's also one that you could pivot to, after their bye. They don't have a bye. That's right.
Yes, you don't even have to
round 3 potentially even, or something like that. Correction.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because it's 300K. It's like, well, what are we needing from him? He's priced at 58. So if he, you always think perfect world, you want 35 on that. That's 93. Do I see him as a 93 guy? No, but could he be an 80 to 85 guy? For sure. No problem for a period of time. Is that enough? When we're talking about rookies where we want a minimum of 100K, anything more is obviously a bonus. And from that, can this guy, I feel like he gets the 400K, no problems. Especially if Hopper's in there at the moment. If there is, he's the sort of guy, if for whatever reason he starts slow and there were injuries at Richmond, potential there.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the roundup of all of our potential mid selections for Supercoach this year, and hopefully it's given you guys some either some confirmation bias or no, just kidding. No, honestly, we've put a pile of work into preseason. Tip of the cap to Swizz over there for literally interviewing every man and his dog, going through every single team multiple times, even for some teams, analyzing all the preseason games, and still having a wife at the end of the day. I just don't know how she does it.
I might not after tonight, but yes.
So absolutely thanks to you, mate. But we will obviously be back very shortly. We'll polish off the forwards and the rucks. And then next week, we're going to come on board big with our top 10 selections. So keep an eye out for that one. But until then, guys, catch you later. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Bye.